Welcome to North Stories. The first thing I remember is the hum of machines, their faint, flickering lights casting shadows on the walls of my apartment. It was small, almost claustrophobic, but it was mine. I spent most of my time here, in front of my computer, staring into the void. The world outside was a cacophony of noise, traffic, people, the constant hum of life, but in here, it was different. In here, I had control. My name is Lucian. That's what the world knows me as, at least. It's funny, really, how many people walk around thinking they know who they are, when in reality, they're just shadows of the expectations placed on them. I've always felt like that. A shadow, flickering at the edge of reality. A ghost in the system. I guess that's why I turned to code. Computers made sense. They were predictable, logical. There was no guessing, no hidden meanings, no deception. Just pure, binary truth. Ones and zeros. The real world, that was different. People lied. The world was messy. But here, in the digital ether, I could breathe. I work for the Nexus Corporation. It's the kind of company that owns everything without anyone really realizing it. They make the devices we use, the networks we connect to, even the currency we buy with. Nexus has its fingers in every pie, quietly pulling the strings from behind a sleek corporate curtain. My job? Cybersecurity. The irony is not lost on me. I protect them from people like myself. Or rather, the person I used to be. I wasn't always this way. There was a time when I believed in change, in revolution. A time when I thought we could take down the system. But now, I'm just a cog in the machine. Another faceless entity, doing my job, collecting my paycheck, and letting the world spin on, oblivious to the fact that it's being consumed from the inside out. That was until the message came. It was late, and I was exhausted. My eyes burned from staring at the screen too long. I was about to log off when the notification appeared. Just a simple pop-up, something I'd normally ignore. But this one was different. The sender was anonymous, the subject line blank. Curious, I clicked. Do you ever feel like there's something wrong with the world? Something beneath the surface, hiding in plain sight? I can show you the truth. You've been watching them for long enough. It's time to act. Meet me. Midnight. Under the viaduct. Alone. I sat back in my chair, my pulse quickening. A prank? A trap? Or was it something else? My mind raced with possibilities, but one thing was clear: whoever sent this knew me. They knew what I was thinking, what I felt deep down. That the world wasn't right. That there was something more going on. Something hidden. That night I didn't sleep. I watched the clock, each minute ticking by, pulling me closer to the time I'd have to make a decision. Midnight. I'd never been one to take risks. I liked my routine, my safety. But there was something about this message. Something I couldn't shake. At 11:45 I grabbed my jacket and left my apartment. The streets were eerily quiet, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I made my way to the viaduct, a forgotten place on the outskirts of the city, where the old infrastructure crumbled into the ground. It was the perfect spot for something clandestine. For something dangerous. I waited there, under the archway, the cold air biting at my skin. Minutes passed, and I began to wonder if this was a mistake. If maybe I was just another pawn in someone's game. But then I saw him. He emerged from the shadows, a figure cloaked in darkness, his face obscured by the hood of his jacket. He moved with purpose, but there was something about him that made me uneasy. Something familiar. You came, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. He stopped a few feet in front of me, not close enough to be a threat, but close enough to make his presence known. Who are you? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, tossing it to me. I caught it instinctively, looking down at the simple black rectangle in my hand. Open it when you get home, he said. Everything you need to know is on there. And why should I trust you? He laughed, a short, humorless sound. You don't have to trust me. But you know I'm right. You know there's something bigger going on, something Nexus doesn't want you to see. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. How did he know? How could he possibly know what I was thinking? Who are you? I asked again, my voice sharper now. He stepped forward, his face now partially illuminated by the street lamp behind me. I could see the outline of his features, the shadow of a beard, the glint in his eyes. He was older than I expected. Worn, like someone who'd seen too much, done too much. Call me Cypher, he said. And we've been watching you for a long time, Lucian. My heart skipped a beat. I stepped back, instinctively putting more distance between us. Who's we? I demanded. He smiled, a knowing, cryptic smile. You'll find out soon enough. Just be ready. The world you know is about to change. With that, he turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving me standing there, clutching the mysterious device in my hand. I made my way back home, my mind racing. Who was Cypher? What did he want with me? And more importantly, what was on this device? I spent the next few hours poring over it, decrypting the data, piecing together fragments of information. What I found, it changed everything. Nexus was bigger than I thought. Much bigger. They weren't just a corporation, they were the corporation. Every aspect of modern life was tied to them, controlled by them. From the food we eat to the medicine we take, to the very infrastructure of the internet itself. They had their hands in everything. And behind the scenes, they were manipulating it all. Worse, they weren't just after profit. They were after control. Complete and total control. The device contained files, thousands of them, detailing secret projects, covert operations, and the identities of key players in the global economy. But it wasn't just information. It was a blueprint. A plan to take Nexus down. I sat there in the dark, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the files. It was overwhelming. A part of me wanted to stop, to delete everything and pretend I never saw it. But another part of me wanted to act. To do something. That's when I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. Not after this. Not after seeing the truth. And just like that, Lucian, the quiet, unassuming programmer, was gone. In his place, someone new was emerging. Someone who would tear down the walls of the system, brick by brick. I didn't know it at the time, but this was just the beginning. The beginning of the end. I didn't sleep after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the world of Nexus spun in the darkness behind my eyelids, each revelation more terrifying than the last. Their reach was total. The more I read through the files Cypher had given me, the more I realized how intricately they had woven themselves into every part of society. Their technology wasn't just in our hands, it was in our minds, controlling our behavior in ways too subtle to notice but too powerful to escape. I became obsessed. The next few days were a blur of code and coffee, my fingers barely leaving the keyboard as I tore through the information, hunting for answers. There was something deeper in those files. I knew it. Some pattern that, once uncovered, would give me the key to everything. But the more I searched, the more I felt like I was drowning. The truth was so massive, so overwhelming, that it almost felt like it couldn't be real. But it was. It was the morning of the fourth day when I noticed it, a recurring name buried in the code, popping up in places that didn't make sense. Project Leviathan. At first, it was just a passing mention, a word that meant nothing. But the more I looked, the more I saw it, hidden in financial documents, mentioned in private emails between Nexus executives, referenced in confidential reports. I had no idea what Project Leviathan was, but I knew it wasn't good. It was something Nexus had been hiding, something they were keeping from the world. I didn't know who to trust. I couldn't talk to anyone at Nexus, that much was obvious. They were all complicit, knowingly or not. And the only person who might have answers was Cypher, who had vanished as quickly as he appeared. I searched through the files again, trying to find some way to reach him, but there was nothing. Just the cold, impersonal data staring back at me. Frustrated, I slammed my fist onto the desk, the thud echoing through the empty room. What now? What was I supposed to do with all this? I couldn't take on Nexus by myself. I was just a hacker, a good one, sure, but I wasn't a revolutionary. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was no one else. If I didn't do something, no one would. They would continue to tighten their grip on the world, and soon there wouldn't be anything left to save. That night, the door to my apartment buzzed. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. No one ever came to my apartment, especially not unannounced. I stared at the door for a long moment, every nerve in my body on high alert. Buzz. Slowly, I approached, my mind racing. Was it Cypher? Or was it Nexus? Had they found out? Were they coming for me? I looked through the peephole and saw a figure standing outside, dressed in a worn leather jacket, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. My hand shook as I unlocked the door and pulled it open, just wide enough to see the man more clearly. He looked older, his face lined with the kind of experience that only came from living in the shadows for too long. "You're Lucian, right?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. I didn't answer at first, unsure if this was some sort of trick. "Who's asking?" "Cypher sent me," he said, his eyes darting nervously down the hallway as if expecting someone to be watching. "We don't have much time." I opened the door wider, stepping aside as he walked in quickly, scanning the room as if checking for bugs. His paranoia was palpable, and it put me on edge. "Who are you?" I demanded, closing the door behind him. "Call me Beck," he replied, his gaze finally settling on me. "I work with Cypher." "Well, worked with him. Things have gotten complicated." "Complicated how?" "Nexus is onto you," he said bluntly. "I don't know how, but they've been monitoring you. Cypher figured it out just in time, but we need to move fast if we're going to stay ahead of them." A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had been careful, more careful than I'd ever been. How had they found out? How much did they know? Beck must have seen the panic on my face because he held up a hand to calm me. "It's not over yet. We've still got time, but we need to be smart about this. Nexus isn't like other companies. They're ruthless, and they don't care about collateral damage." "I've seen the files," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know what they're capable of." Beck nodded grimly. "Good. Then you understand what's at stake. Cypher didn't bring you in because you're some random hacker. He brought you in because he thinks you can help us take them down. I'm not sure I'm the right guy for this," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "I didn't sign up for a war. Neither did any of us," Beck said, his voice hardening. "But it doesn't matter anymore. Whether you like it or not, you're already in this. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in. He was right. There was no turning back now. I had seen too much. Even if I wanted to walk away, Nexus wouldn't let me. They were probably watching me right now, waiting for me to slip up. If I didn't act, they'd crush me, just like they had crushed so many others. "What's Project Leviathan?" I asked finally, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. Beck's expression darkened. "I was hoping you wouldn't find that," he muttered under his breath. He crossed the room and pulled a chair away from the cluttered desk before sitting down, looking tired, defeated. "What is it?" I pressed. Beck hesitated for a long moment, then let out a sigh. "Leviathan is their endgame. Nexus has been working on it for years, using the world's data. Everything we do, everything we say, everything we buy, and everything we feel, to create a perfect simulation of society. A digital mirror of humanity, one they can manipulate in real time." I frowned, trying to wrap my head around it. "A simulation?" Beck nodded. "They call it a digital consciousness. Essentially, they want to predict every human behavior, every decision, every outcome. Once they perfect it, they'll have total control. Governments, economies, even people's thoughts. They'll know what we're going to do before we do it. They'll control the future." My blood ran cold. This was bigger than I had imagined. Nexus wasn't just trying to dominate the market, they were trying to dominate humanity itself. To control everything, everyone. How do we stop it? I asked, my voice trembling. Beck leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my skin prickle. We're not going to stop it. Not yet. First, we need to understand it. We need to get into Leviathan's core and find out how deep it goes. That's why Cypher brought you in. You're one of the only people who can crack that code. I swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of the task settle on my shoulders. I wasn't sure I was ready for this. But at the same time, I knew there was no one else. It had to be me. It was me or no one. Where do we start? Beck pulled out a small drive from his pocket and placed it on the table between us. Cypher left this for you. It's everything we've got on Leviathan so far. But there's more. Something we couldn't get our hands on. What's that? The key to Leviathan is in Nexus's central server. It's in their headquarters, buried under layers of security. If we can get in, we can destroy it from the inside. I stared at the drive, my mind racing. This wasn't just hacking into some corporation's database. This was breaking into the heart of the most powerful company in the world. A company that had eyes everywhere. It's impossible, I said, shaking my head. Their security is unbreakable? Beck interrupted with a smirk. That's what they want you to think. But Cypher has a way in. It's dangerous, sure. But it's not impossible. I looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. This was real. This was happening. If I agreed to this, there was no going back. No safety net. No escape. And yet, deep down, I knew I didn't have a choice. I was already in too deep. When do we start? Beck smiled, but there was no joy in it. Just grim determination. Now. After that night, my life became a ticking bomb. Every moment was measured against the weight of what was coming. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to absorb everything Cypher and Beck had thrown at me. Leviathan. Nexus. The simulation of humanity itself. It was all too big, too surreal, but I couldn't escape it. I was in, and there was no turning back. Beck had given me the drive Cypher left behind, and it became my lifeline. I immersed myself in it, peeling back layers of encrypted code and fragments of information. My mind buzzed with algorithms, network pathways, and digital ghosts. The files detailed how Nexus had been building Leviathan for over a decade. They had been feeding it data from every device, every transaction, every search. All of it was fuel for the simulation. And worse, they were nearly ready to switch it on. Once Leviathan went live, Nexus would be untouchable. Governments would be powerless, and society would shift into whatever Nexus willed it to be. I imagined a world where everything we did was orchestrated by an unseen hand, where free will was nothing more than an illusion. And we would never know. Not really. We'd go about our lives, thinking we were in control, never realizing the strings were being pulled from above. I couldn't let that happen. It was late one night, deep into my third straight day without sleep, when I found it. A vulnerability in the Leviathan architecture, hidden so well it was almost invisible. But it was there, like a hairline crack in a fortress wall. It wasn't enough to destroy the system, but it was a way in. And it led directly to the heart of Nexus's main server. But it wouldn't be easy. Even with this vulnerability, Nexus's security was still one of the most sophisticated systems in the world. If I made one wrong move, they'd know I was inside. And once they knew, well, let's just say that Nexus didn't handle intrusions lightly. They had teams of hackers on standby, ready to squash any threat, and resources that dwarfed anything I could muster. It was going to be a suicide mission if I didn't plan every detail perfectly. I spent the next week preparing. Beck disappeared after our first meeting, but he left me instructions through encrypted messages. He was gathering intel, working on the ground to prepare for what would come next. He told me to stay low, to avoid any suspicious activity that might tip Nexus off, but that was easier said than done. Everywhere I went, I felt like I was being watched. Every shadow, Every passerby seemed like a potential threat. Paranoia crept in like a virus, poisoning my thoughts. Was Nexus already onto me? Had they already begun their surveillance? Every time I passed a security camera or glanced at my phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were right there, watching my every move. One night, while I was holed up in my apartment, working through the intricacies of Nexus's defenses, there was a knock at the door. My heart froze. I hadn't seen Beck in days, and no one else even knew I existed. At least, no one from my old life. Whoever was at the door wasn't here for a social visit. I stood up slowly, every nerve in my body on edge, and peered through the peephole. There was no one there. The hallway was empty, the dim light casting eerie shadows across the walls. I waited, listening for any sound, footsteps, breathing, anything, but there was only silence. My heart pounded in my ears as I unlocked the door and opened it cautiously. There on the floor was a small package. No label, no markings, just a plain black box, the size of my hand. I crouched down, my mind racing with possibilities. Nexus? Beck? Or something else entirely? I picked up the box and carried it inside, setting it down on my desk as if it were a bomb. For all I knew, it could be. I hesitated before opening it, my fingers trembling. When I finally flipped the lid open, I saw a small earpiece nestled inside, sleek and black, with a note tucked underneath it. Wear this tomorrow. 3 a.m. You'll know what to do. No signature, no explanation. But somehow, I knew it was from Cypher. The next day was a blur. I couldn't focus on anything except the earpiece sitting on my desk, its presence haunting me. I didn't know what Cypher was planning, or why 3 a.m. was the chosen time, but I had a gut feeling that whatever it was important. I spent the hours leading up to it pacing my apartment, running over scenarios in my head, trying to prepare for whatever was coming. At 2:45, I put the earpiece in, feeling its weight settle against my ear. The silence was deafening. I sat at my desk, staring at the screen, watching the minutes tick by with agonizing slowness. And then, at exactly 3 a.m., a voice crackled to life in my ear. "Lucian," the voice said softly. It was Cypher. His voice was calm, measured, but there was an urgency beneath it. "I need you to listen carefully. They're moving ahead with Leviathan. Faster than we anticipated. Nexus has already begun the final phases of the project." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "How much time do we have?" "Days. Maybe less," Cypher replied. "They're running a final systems check tomorrow night. After that, it goes live. If we don't act now, it's over." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What do you need me to do?" "Beck is handling the physical side of the operation," Cypher explained. "But we need you inside the system. You're the only one who can get past their defenses. I've already sent the access codes you'll need. When Beck makes his move, you'll have a small window, maybe 10 minutes, to get into the core and plant the malware. What happens after that?" I asked, my stomach twisting with nerves. Cypher hesitated. "After that, we take Leviathan down. For good." The line went dead, leaving me in the thick silence of my apartment, the weight of what was coming pressing down on me like a physical force. This was it. The point of no return. Once I did this, there was no going back. Nexus would know I was involved, and they wouldn't stop until they found me. But if we didn't act, if we didn't stop Leviathan, the consequences would be far worse. I spent the next 24 hours preparing. Beck sent me encrypted messages with updates on his end of the plan. He had managed to infiltrate Nexus's security team, posing as an external contractor hired to assess their vulnerabilities. It gave him just enough cover to slip into the building undetected when the time came. As the clock ticked closer to the moment of action, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Maybe it was the inevitability of it all, or maybe it was the sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Whatever it was, I knew this was the moment I had been moving toward ever since that first message from Cypher. Everything had led to this. Finally, the night came. I sat in front of my computer, fingers poised over the keyboard, the earpiece crackling to life in my ear. "Lucian, it's time," Cypher said, his voice steady but tense. "Beck's in position. Are you ready?" "Yeah," I whispered, my hands already moving across the keys. "Let's do this." I launched the program I had been working on for the last week, a custom malware designed to infiltrate Leviathan's core and corrupt its data without triggering any of Nexus's security protocols. It was the most complex code I had ever written, but it was our only shot. The screen filled with lines of code, the data streaming faster than I could process. Beck's signal came through moments later, a confirmation that he had breached the Nexus facility. He was inside. "Beck's in," Cypher confirmed. "You have 10 minutes. Go." My fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through Nexus's labyrinth of firewalls and encryption layers. Every second counted. Every keystroke had to be perfect. For a moment, everything went smoothly. I slipped past their security like a ghost, my malware threading through the system without detection. But then, just as I reached the final firewall, the system's defenses shifted. Something changed. Alarms started blaring inside Nexus. My heart sank as red warning lights flashed across my screen. They had found me. "Lucian, they know!" Beck's voice came through, strained and breathless. "We're running out of time." I could hear gunshots in the background of his transmission. Nexus wasn't just watching, they were fighting back. I glanced at the timer on my screen. 4 minutes. It wasn't enough time. Nexus's countermeasures were kicking in, blocking my access at every turn. Panic clawed at my chest, my fingers shaking as I tried to override their system. But it was no use. I was locked out. "Lucian, you need to abort!" Cypher's voice crackled in my ear, the urgency palpable. "They'll trace it back to you." I stared at the screen, the lines of code flickering in front of me. Everything was falling apart. The mission, the plan, it was all unraveling. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let Leviathan go live. My hand hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for only a moment before I made the decision that could either destroy me or give us a fighting chance. I wasn't going to run. If I ran now, Leviathan would go live, and everything Cypher, Beck, and I had done would be for nothing. I overrode the abort command and typed furiously, my fingers dancing over the keys in a blur. If I couldn't hack my way through Nexus's defenses, I would have to brute force my way in. It was dangerous, reckless, even, but it was the only option left. I deployed every tool I had, throwing everything at Nexus's firewalls, hoping something would stick. "Lucian, what are you doing?" Cypher's voice barked in my ear. "You can't win this. I'm not leaving without taking Leviathan down." I shot back, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "There's no time, Cypher." The system buckled under the pressure. Warning lights blared as Nexus's security team scrambled to isolate me. They were closing in, but I was faster. Barely. I had breached the final firewall, bypassing the last layer of encryption. The heart of Leviathan was laid bare in front of me, lines of code shimmering on the screen like the core of a living, breathing entity. 3 minutes left. I loaded the malware into the system, the code injecting itself deep into Leviathan's architecture. My heart raced as I watched the progress bar slowly fill, each percentage taking longer than the last. Beck's voice cut through the chaos in my ear. "They've found me. I don't know how much longer I can hold them off." I could hear the panic in his voice, the sound of footsteps pounding in the background, the tension building. Nexus's security team was closing in on him, and I knew what that meant. They weren't just going to arrest him. They were going to kill him. "Just hold on," I muttered, my eyes glued to the progress bar. "Almost there. 90%. The seconds felt like hours. Beck's breathing was heavy now, erratic, and I could hear shouting in the background. Gunshots. A crash. Cypher came back on the line, his voice tight. "Lucian, if you don't pull out now, they'll trace you. They'll come for you." I clenched my teeth, ignoring the voice in my head telling me to stop. To pull the plug and get out while I still could. But I knew deep down that if I left now, Nexus would win. Leviathan would go live, and the world would be theirs. 95%. They're in the building. Beck's voice was frantic now. Lucian, His voice cut off, followed by a sickening silence. My stomach twisted, the realization crashing over me like a tidal wave. They had found him. Beck was gone. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling. I couldn't let his death be for nothing. 98%. My entire world had shrunk to that tiny bar on the screen. Every fiber of my being was focused on making sure it reached 100. One final push. 99%. The screen flickered. For a split second, everything went black. My heart stopped, thinking Nexus had shut me out. But then, the malware completed its upload, embedding itself deep within Leviathan's core. 100%. I slammed the execute command. For a moment, nothing happened. Just silence. I stared at the screen, holding my breath, waiting for the system to implode. And then, like a chain reaction, Leviathan's data began to unravel. The core corrupted from the inside, the simulation breaking apart line by line. Nexus's perfect digital mirror of humanity disintegrated before my eyes, fracturing into chaos. It was beautiful in a strange, horrifying way. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It was done. Leviathan was dead. But the victory was short-lived. Almost immediately, alarms went off in my apartment. Nexus had traced me. I saw my network connection spike as their security systems zeroed in on my location. I was already being hunted. Lucian! Cypher's voice came through, filled with a desperation I hadn't heard before. You need to run. Now. I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed the essentials, my laptop, the drive Cypher had given me, and a few other things I could fit in my bag. There was no time to think. I bolted out of my apartment, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. It wouldn't matter. They'd be there soon, if they weren't already. The stairwell was empty as I sprinted down the steps, my footsteps echoing in the hollow space. My mind raced with possibilities, trying to figure out where to go, how to disappear. I knew Nexus would stop at nothing to find me. They had resources far beyond anything I could imagine, and they weren't going to let me slip away after what I had done. I hit the street, blending into the late-night crowd, keeping my head low as I navigated the winding alleyways of the city. My breath came in ragged gasps, but I didn't stop moving. I couldn't. If I stopped, I was dead. Cypher's voice came through my earpiece again, quieter now, almost like a whisper. Lucian, listen to me. There's a safe house outside the city. I'm sending you the coordinates. It'll buy you some time, but not much. Beck, I started, my voice thick with guilt and exhaustion. I know, Cypher said softly. But you can't think about that now. He knew the risks. We all did. I nodded, even though Cypher couldn't see me. There was no time for mourning. No time for anything except survival. Beck's sacrifice had given me this chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. As I disappeared into the night, my mind raced with what came next. Nexus would regroup. They would rebuild. Leviathan might be destroyed, but the war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was just the beginning. I knew deep down that Cypher and I would have to keep running. Keep fighting. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The system wasn't invincible. Nexus wasn't all-powerful. They could be beaten. It wouldn't be easy, and the costs would be high. But now, I knew it was possible. As I ran through the darkened streets, the weight of the world pressing down on me, I realized something else. I wasn't alone. Cypher was still out there, and somewhere there were others like us. People who hadn't yet fallen under Nexus's control. People who could still resist. And maybe, just maybe, we could win. For the first time in years, the future didn't seem like a prison. It felt like a fight worth having. I found the safe house Cypher had sent me to deep in the industrial outskirts of the city. It was a nondescript, rundown warehouse, the kind of place no one would give a second glance. The entrance was hidden behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. When I finally slipped through the door, exhaustion hit me like a wave. My legs felt like they might give out at any second, but I couldn't stop yet. I needed to make sure this place was safe. The inside was sparse, bare concrete floors and a few pieces of old furniture scattered around. There was a bed shoved into one corner, a small kitchen area in the back, and most importantly, an entire wall dedicated to tech. Old computer parts, routers, monitors, and cables covered the floor like a graveyard of forgotten technology. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to keep me hidden. Enough to plan my next move. I collapsed onto the bed, my body screaming for rest, but my mind refused to quiet down. Beck was gone. The reality of it hit me hard now that I wasn't running for my life. He had been one of the only people I trusted, one of the only people who understood what was at stake. And now he was dead, because of me. Because of the choices I made. I felt the crushing weight of guilt settle in my chest, but I couldn't let it consume me. Beck had known the risks, and he had made his choice. Just like I had. Still, the silence of the safe house felt oppressive, every minute dragging out the ache of his absence. I glanced at my laptop, the only thing connecting me to Cypher, to the outside world. Part of me wanted to reach out, to hear Cypher's voice again, to feel like I wasn't completely alone in this fight. But I knew that wasn't safe. Not yet. I spent the next few hours setting up basic security protocols, scrambling the signal of the safe house so Nexus couldn't track me here. My fingers moved mechanically over the keyboard, the familiar motions grounding me, helping to push the grief and fear to the back of my mind. The system I was building would buy me some time, but it wouldn't be long before Nexus's team started sweeping the city, looking for any trace of me. I needed to stay ahead of them. After hours of work, I finally leaned back in the chair, staring at the screen. It was time to figure out what came next. Leviathan might be dead, but Nexus was still out there, still planning, still powerful. And if there was one thing I knew, it was that they weren't going to let this slide. They would come for me. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I couldn't afford to be caught off guard when that happened. As I sat there, my mind racing, a notification popped up on my screen. An encrypted message. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, expecting it to be Cypher. But it wasn't. The message was simple. You don't know what you've done, but I can help. There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it. My immediate reaction was suspicion. This could easily be a trap, Nexus luring me out, trying to trick me into exposing myself. But there was something about the message, something that didn't fit Nexus's usual methods. If they wanted to catch me, they'd be more direct. They wouldn't send cryptic messages. They'd just send an army to my doorstep. I stared at the message, trying to figure out what to do. If this was legit, whoever sent it might have valuable information. But if it was a trap, well, I didn't have the luxury of making mistakes right now. Before I could decide what to do, another message came through, this time with an attachment. A map. I clicked on it, and a set of coordinates appeared on the screen. It wasn't far, just a few miles outside the city. The message that followed was just as brief as the first. Meet me. Midnight. Bring nothing that can be traced. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous. But I couldn't ignore the possibility that this person, whoever they were, might have answers. Might know something about Nexus that could give me an edge. Beck was gone, and Cypher was still in the shadows. I didn't have many options left. I made the decision to go, but I wasn't going in blind. I spent the next few hours rigging up a surveillance system I could monitor remotely. I couldn't bring any tech with me, but that didn't mean I couldn't watch my own back from a distance. I'd leave the laptop running, linked to a few strategically placed cameras I'd set up around the warehouse. If anything went wrong, I'd be able to see it coming. The hours dragged as I prepared, tension tightening in my chest the closer I got to midnight. When the time came, I left the safe house, stepping out into the cool night air, my senses heightened by adrenaline. I moved through the back streets, careful to stay in the shadows, avoiding cameras and well-lit areas. Even though the safe house was secure for now, I couldn't afford to draw any attention. The meeting spot was an old, abandoned construction site on the outskirts of the city, half-built skyscrapers looming like skeletons in the dark. I could hear the faint hum of the city in the distance, but out here, it was eerily quiet. Too quiet. I waited, keeping my back to a wall, eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. Midnight came and went, but there was no one. The silence stretched on, and doubt began to creep in. Had I walked into a trap? Was this all some elaborate setup to flush me out? Just as I was about to leave, I heard it. A soft click, the unmistakable sound of a gun's safety being disengaged. "Don't move," a voice said from the shadows. I froze, my mind racing, trying to calculate my next move. The voice was calm, steady, and close enough that I knew I wouldn't be able to make a run for it. Whoever they were, they had the upper hand. "Turn around slowly," the voice commanded. I did as I was told, turning to face the source of the voice. A figure stepped out of the darkness, and my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a Nexus operative. It was a woman, dressed in dark, practical clothes, her face obscured by a hood. But what really caught my attention wasn't her appearance. It was the way she held herself. She was completely in control. Calm, composed, like someone who had seen their fair share of dangerous situations and knew how to handle them. "You're Lucian," she said, her voice low but steady. "And you are?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level despite the gun pointed at me. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied me, as if weighing whether or not to trust me. Finally, she lowered the gun, but kept it in her hand, ready. "My name doesn't matter," she said. "But I know who you are, and I know what you've done." I tensed, but she continued before I could respond. "You think you destroyed Leviathan, don't you?" she asked, her tone challenging. I blinked, caught off guard. "I did. The system is down." She shook her head, a small, almost pitying smile on her lips. "You disrupted the system. You slowed it down. But you didn't destroy it." Her words sent a cold wave of dread through me. "What are you talking about?" She sighed, stepping closer, her eyes locking onto mine. "Leviathan is more than just a piece of code. It's an ideology. A structure built to survive, no matter how many pieces of it you break. You might have crippled it, but it's already adapting. Evolving." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. All this time, I thought I had dealt the killing blow, that Leviathan was gone for good. But what she was saying, it meant Nexus was still in control. They hadn't lost anything. "Then why are you here?" I asked, my voice harsher than I intended. "If Leviathan is still out there, what's your plan?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by my attitude. "Because there's a bigger fight ahead. And you're going to need allies if you want any chance of winning." I stared at her, trying to figure out if this was another trick, another layer of deception. But something about the way she spoke, the way she carried herself, told me she was telling the truth. She wasn't Nexus. She wasn't part of their system. "And why should I trust you?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. She shrugged. "You don't have to. But if you don't, you'll be dead within the week." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "I've been fighting Nexus longer than you've been on their radar. I know their tactics, their weaknesses. And I know what's coming next." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean, what's coming next?" She glanced around, as if making sure we were still alone, then leaned in slightly. "You took out one arm of Leviathan. But Nexus has been working on something else. Something bigger." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" She hesitated, her eyes scanning mine, as if debating whether to share the full truth. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and grim. "They call it Oblivion." The word hung in the air between us, heavy and foreboding. My pulse raced as the implications started to form in my mind. Leviathan was bad enough, but Oblivion, the very name suggested something far more destructive, something that could make everything I had done meaningless. I took a step forward, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "What is Oblivion? What are they planning?" The woman kept her gaze steady, the faint glow of the city lights casting shadows across her face. She glanced around again before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oblivion is Nexus's final weapon. Leviathan was designed to control the flow of information, to manipulate the world through data. But Oblivion? Oblivion is designed to wipe the slate clean." My heart sank as her words sank in. Wipe the slate clean? I wasn't sure what that meant exactly, but it sounded catastrophic. "You mean destroy everything?" She shook her head slightly, but the look in her eyes told me it wasn't much better. "Not destroy. Rewrite. Oblivion is a system that can erase identities, rewrite history, and collapse entire infrastructures. It doesn't just control information, it redefines reality itself. And Nexus has already begun to deploy it." I felt a chill run down my spine. Oblivion wasn't just about control. It was about erasing the very fabric of existence as people knew it. Nexus wouldn't need to manipulate public perception or influence governments if they could simply delete anyone who opposed them from the world. Entire movements, entire lives gone in an instant, like they had never existed. "You're telling me they've already started?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She nodded grimly. "In small doses. Testing the system, ensuring it works on a global scale. It's still in the early stages, but once they go live, it'll be too late. They'll have full control of every system, every record. There won't be a world outside of Nexus's design." I swallowed hard, trying to process the enormity of what she was telling me. I had thought Leviathan was the endgame, the thing that would finally break the world. But Oblivion was something far worse. Something unstoppable unless... "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, forcing myself to focus. "If Oblivion is that powerful, what can I possibly do to stop it?" The woman gave me a sharp look, the intensity in her eyes burning through the darkness. "Because you've already proven that you can hit Nexus where it hurts. You took down Leviathan, at least part of it. You disrupted their plans. And right now, you're one of the only people left who knows how to fight them." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Me? A hacker with barely enough resources to keep myself hidden from Nexus's radar, fighting a global conglomerate that had already taken down governments and rewritten the economy? But I didn't laugh, because deep down, I knew she was right. I was in too deep to turn back now. "So, what's the plan?" I asked, trying to mask the uncertainty in my voice. "How do we stop Oblivion?" She didn't hesitate. "Oblivion's core is housed in Nexus's most secure facility. It's off-grid, buried beneath layers of encryption and security. There's no hacking it remotely. We'd have to infiltrate the facility, physically get to the servers, and destroy the core. Permanently." I stared at her, stunned. Infiltrate a Nexus facility? That was insane. "You're talking about a suicide mission." She smiled, a cold, calculating expression that didn't reach her eyes. "It's only suicide if we fail." I took a deep breath, trying to clear the fog of fear and confusion clouding my mind. Infiltrating Nexus's most secure facility wasn't just impossible, it was unthinkable. But what choice did I have? Beck had died for this fight. Cypher had sacrificed everything to stay in the shadows, feeding me information. If Oblivion went live, all of that would be erased. I would be erased. I couldn't let that happen. "Who else knows about this?" I asked, my mind racing with possibilities. "Do you have a team?" She shook her head. "I've been working solo for a while now. Anyone who knew about Oblivion is either dead or in hiding. Nexus has done a good job of cleaning up." That wasn't reassuring. "So, it's just us?" "For now," she said. "But there are still others out there. People who've slipped through Nexus's grasp. We'll need to gather them, rally them to the cause. We can't do this alone." I nodded, even though the enormity of what she was suggesting made my stomach twist with anxiety. Okay. What's the first step? She finally lowered her gun completely and glanced toward the dark horizon. We'll need resources, equipment, and we need to find Cypher. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Cypher? I repeated, confused. You know Cypher? She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. Of course. He's the one who brought me into this fight. We were working together for years before he had to go underground. He's been tracking Oblivion for longer than anyone. My heart skipped a beat. If Cypher was the one who had brought her into the fight, then that meant he knew about Oblivion this entire time. He knew there was something bigger, something worse than Leviathan, and he hadn't told me. I felt a mix of betrayal and understanding. Cypher was paranoid, secretive to a fault. He hadn't trusted me with the full picture, maybe to protect me, maybe because he didn't think I was ready. But it didn't matter now. We needed him, and we needed him fast. Do you know where he is? I asked, hoping she had some kind of lead. She shook her head. No, but I know how to reach him. He won't come out of hiding unless he's sure it's safe, but if we make the right moves, he'll find us. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Everything was spiraling out of control, and I had no idea where this would end. But I knew one thing for certain: Nexus wasn't going to stop. Oblivion was coming, and if we didn't act fast, it would consume everything. All right, I said, finally accepting the path ahead. Let's find Cypher. She nodded, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. And Lucian? Don't think for a second that this will be easy. Nexus will be hunting us every step of the way. I met her gaze, the weight of Beck's sacrifice and Cypher's secrecy pressing on me, but I was resolute. I've made it this far. I'm not turning back now. Without another word, we disappeared into the night, the city lights fading behind us as we headed toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was running. I was fighting. And this fight wasn't over yet. We moved through the darkened streets with purpose, like shadows slipping between the cracks of a city that didn't care about us. The woman, who still hadn't given me her name, led the way with a calm precision, her every step deliberate. I was struggling to keep up, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Cypher. Nexus. Oblivion. All of it spun in my head like a storm. But one thought stood out above the rest. We were running out of time. If Oblivion was already active in small doses, then we didn't have long before Nexus launched it fully. And when they did, everything we knew, everything we fought for, would be wiped away like it never existed. I didn't know exactly what Oblivion could do, but the idea that Nexus could rewrite reality itself was enough to terrify me. I'd spent years fighting against them, but this was a whole new level. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. We ducked into a narrow alley, the distant hum of the city a dull throb in the background. I glanced at her, trying to read her expression, but she was as composed as ever, her eyes sharp and focused. I couldn't help but wonder what her story was. She had mentioned working with Cypher, but that was all I knew. And in this game, knowing the people you worked with was everything. Are you ever going to tell me your name? I asked, breaking the silence as we moved toward a safer part of town. She glanced at me sideways, a small smirk playing on her lips. Names don't matter much in our world, do they? I shrugged, trying to suppress my frustration. Maybe not. But if we're going to take down Nexus, I'd at least like to know what to call you. She slowed her pace, considering this for a moment. Then, without looking at me, she said, Kara. You can call me Kara. It wasn't much, but it was something. A name, a fragment of trust in a world where trust was a rare commodity. We walked in silence for a while longer, the cold night air wrapping around us, until finally, we reached a small, nondescript building tucked between two crumbling apartment complexes. This is it, Kara said, stopping in front of a faded metal door. A safe house. Temporary, but secure. I followed her inside, my senses on high alert. The space was tight, cramped with mismatched furniture and outdated tech equipment scattered across the floor. It was clear this place wasn't built for comfort, just functionality. It reminded me of my old safe house, the one I'd abandoned when Nexus had come too close. This was the life we lived, constantly on the run, never staying in one place too long, never feeling completely safe. Kara wasted no time, heading straight to a terminal in the corner and powering it up. I watched as the screen flickered to life, lines of code scrolling across it. "We need to ping Cypher," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "He's been off-grid for a while, but I know the back channels he uses. If he's watching, he'll see this." I nodded, still unsure of how much I could trust her, but I had no other choice. We were in this together now, and Cypher was our best hope of figuring out what came next. While Kara worked on the terminal, I paced the room, trying to piece together everything that had happened in the past few days. Beck's death still haunted me, his face flashing in my mind whenever I let my guard down. He had been one of the few people I could rely on, and now he was gone because of Nexus. Because of me. I clenched my fists, the anger rising in my chest. I needed to channel that rage into something useful. I needed to focus. "Got it," Kara said, breaking my train of thought. I stopped pacing and turned to face her. "Cypher?" "Sort of," she said, her eyes fixed on the screen. "I sent the message through an encrypted relay. It'll bounce through a dozen different servers before it reaches him. If he's monitoring the network, he'll pick it up. But it could take time." "How much time?" I asked, feeling the weight of every second ticking away. She shrugged, not looking away from the terminal. "Could be hours, could be days. Cypher doesn't like to rush." I let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing the back of my neck. We didn't have days. Oblivion was already in motion, and every moment we waited was another moment Nexus tightened their grip. "Look, while we wait, we need to do something," I said, walking over to the scattered tech in the room. "There has to be a way to gather more intel on Oblivion. If we don't know what we're up against, we're going in blind." Karen nodded, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. "You're right. We can't sit here doing nothing. I've got a few leads on Nexus's movements in the city. They've been ramping up security at certain facilities, more than usual. It's likely one of those sites is tied to Oblivion." I perked up at that. "You think we can infiltrate one of those facilities? Get some hard data?" "It's a risk," she said, standing up and crossing her arms. "But it's the best shot we've got until Cypher contacts us." I nodded, adrenaline already kicking in at the thought of the mission. It had been too long since I'd been on the offensive, and the idea of striking at Nexus, even just for information, felt like a step in the right direction. "Where do we start?" I asked, my mind already shifting into planning mode. Kara moved to the other side of the room, grabbing a tablet and pulling up a map of the city. "There's a facility on the south side. It's a distribution hub on paper, but Nexus's activity there has spiked in the last few weeks. I've been watching them, heavy security, encrypted comms. Something's going on there." I studied the map closely, noting the layout of the surrounding area. It wasn't an ideal location for a break-in, but I'd worked with worse. "What's the plan?" "We go in quiet," Kara said, her tone all business. "We need to avoid detection. Get inside, pull whatever files we can on Oblivion, and get out before they even know we were there." I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. "What kind of security are we looking at?" "Standard Nexus protocols, cameras, armed guards, and motion sensors. Nothing we haven't dealt with before, but we'll need to move fast. Fast, quiet, and invisible." It was a familiar challenge, but one that would push both of us to our limits. I felt a surge of nervous energy course through me, but I kept it under control. This was our chance to learn more about Oblivion, to get ahead of Nexus for once. "When do we move?" I asked, ready to get started. "Tonight," she said, her expression serious. "The less time we waste, the better." The facility was exactly what Kara had described, an unassuming building, tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city, surrounded by layers of Nexus security. From the outside, It looked like a standard warehouse, but the heavy presence of guards and surveillance tech told a different story. We crouched behind an abandoned car across the street, studying the patterns of the guards as they patrolled the perimeter. Kara had been right. This place was locked down tight. But there was always a way in. You just had to know where to look. "There's a blind spot near the loading dock," Kara whispered, her eyes scanning the scene. "We can make it across if we time it right." I nodded, my pulse quickening. We had rehearsed the plan on the way over. Minimal risk, minimal noise. In and out, no distractions. This was a recon mission, nothing more. Kara gave me the signal, and we moved. Fast and low, keeping to the shadows as we crossed the street and slipped into the alley beside the building. The blind spot was small, but it gave us enough cover to make it to the loading dock without tripping any alarms. We crouched by the door, Kara already working on the security panel. She pulled out a small device, a jammer she had rigged up, and connected it to the panel. I watched her work, amazed at her precision. Within seconds, the door unlocked with a faint click, and we were inside. The warehouse was dark, rows of shipping containers stacked high on either side of us. But this wasn't just a storage facility. The air felt different, colder, and the hum of servers buzzed faintly in the background. Kara was right. This place was important to Nexus. We moved silently through the shadows, avoiding the cameras we knew were watching. Kara led the way, her knowledge of Nexus's tech guiding us toward the heart of the facility, a hidden server room tucked away in the back. "This is it," Kara whispered as we approached the room. "Get ready." I nodded, pulling out the USB drive I had brought with me. The plan was simple: plug in, download as much as we could, and get out. But as soon as we stepped into the server room, I knew something was off. The room was empty. No guards, no techs, nothing. Just rows of servers, humming quietly in the dark. "Something's wrong," I said, my voice low. Kara didn't respond, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room, taking in the eerie stillness. The hum of the servers should have felt reassuring, like the pulse of the system we were about to hack, but instead, it felt like a trap. Something was definitely off. "Stay sharp," Kara whispered, her eyes darting between the rows of equipment. She made her way to the nearest terminal, plugging in her device while I kept watch. My instincts screamed at me that we weren't alone, but I couldn't place why. The cameras were quiet, the sensors hadn't triggered, and the guards outside had followed their routines without any changes. But this silence was unnatural. Kara's fingers flew across the keyboard, and the terminal blinked to life. I leaned over her shoulder to check the feed as it scrolled across the screen, a cascade of data filling the monitor. It was encrypted, Nexus-level security, but Kara's program was already slicing through the first layers. "Oblivion's code fragments," Kara murmured under her breath. "We're in." I watched as folders blinked open, revealing files labeled with cryptic names: Psycho Protocol, Gen 3 Simulation, Oblivion Core. My heart raced. This was it. The inner workings of Nexus's most dangerous system, right in front of us. "Download everything you can," I urged, glancing nervously at the door. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, something we hadn't accounted for. My hand hovered over the small knife strapped to my belt, an instinctive precaution against the unknown. Kara was already transferring data to the encrypted drive, her face lit by the glow of the monitor. "This is bigger than I thought," she muttered, her voice tight. "Oblivion isn't just erasing identities. They're experimenting with reality simulations, controlling not just information, but perception. If they finish this, they'll be able to rewrite everything people think they know. History, facts, memories, all of it." My chest tightened. I had thought I understood Nexus's ambitions, but this was something far more sinister. They didn't just want to control the future. They wanted to rewrite the past, create a world where nothing was real unless they said it was. A faint click echoed behind us. I froze. Kara went still, her hand hovering over the keyboard. There it was again, another soft click, like metal shifting against metal. My eyes darted to the shadows at the far end of the room. It was too dark to see, But I could feel something there, something lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. "Kara," I whispered, my hand tightening around the handle of the knife. "We need to go. Now." She didn't argue. The drive finished its transfer, and she pulled it from the terminal, slipping it into her pocket in one swift motion. We moved toward the door, keeping low and quiet, but as we reached the threshold, a voice cut through the air like a blade. "Going somewhere?" I whipped around, my heart pounding in my chest. A figure stepped from the shadows at the far end of the room, moving with an eerie calm. His face was obscured by the low light, but the Nexus emblem gleamed on his jacket, unmistakable. Kara tensed beside me. "Nexus agent," she hissed under her breath. The man stepped closer, his presence filling the room with an oppressive weight. He wasn't like the guards outside. This one was something else, someone higher up the food chain. I could feel the calculated menace rolling off him in waves. "You really thought you could walk into one of our facilities unnoticed?" he said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "We've been expecting you, Lucian. And Kara, of course. Cypher's little pets, running around in the dark, thinking you can stop us." I tightened my grip on the knife, every muscle in my body coiled, ready to strike. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice low but steady. He smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "I'm nobody important. Just someone who cleans up messes. And you, Lucian, you've made quite the mess." Kara shifted beside me, her eyes scanning the room, calculating. She was always a few steps ahead, always planning her next move. I knew what she was thinking. We had to get out of here now. "We've got what we need," Kara whispered urgently. "Let's go." But the man stepped forward, blocking our path, his hand resting on a small device clipped to his belt. "You won't make it far. Nexus has already marked you, both of you. You're part of the cycle now." Cycle. The words sent a shiver down my spine. Kara had mentioned something about it earlier, part of Oblivion's code, something buried deep in the system. But hearing it come from this man, the way he said it, made it sound like more than just code. It sounded like a fate, something inescapable. Kara moved first. In one fluid motion, she tossed a flashbang from her belt. The room exploded with light, blinding white and deafening sound. I reacted on instinct, rushing forward as the man staggered back, disoriented. We sprinted out of the server room, the blare of alarms already beginning to echo through the facility. Nexus knew we were here now, and they wouldn't stop until they had us. Kara and I dashed through the narrow corridors, moving faster than we ever had. My heart pounded in my ears, the weight of the stolen data heavy in my mind. "This way!" Kara shouted over the noise, leading us toward a side exit we had scouted earlier. The plan was falling apart, but if we could just make it out, we'd have a chance to regroup. As we reached the loading dock, I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my side. I stumbled, looking down in horror to see blood seeping through my jacket. I hadn't even heard the shot. "Lucian!" Kara yelled, grabbing me by the arm and pulling me forward. "Come on!" I forced myself to move, gritting my teeth against the pain. We were so close. I could see the door ahead, just a few more steps. But behind us, I heard the steady sound of boots closing in. We burst through the exit and into the cold night air. Kara slammed the door shut behind us, and I collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. My vision blurred, the edges of my consciousness fraying as the blood loss took its toll. Kara knelt beside me, her face tight with worry. "Stay with me, Lucian. We need to keep moving." I nodded weakly, trying to push myself to my feet. The world tilted around me, but I forced myself to stand. We couldn't stop now. Not when we were so close to exposing Oblivion. But as we stumbled down the alley, the sound of Nexus's pursuit growing fainter in the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of something much darker. Oblivion wasn't just a system. It was something alive, something bigger than any of us had realized. And if we didn't stop it soon, there wouldn't be anything left to save. Hours later, we were holed up in another safe house, the tension between us thick. Kara had done her best to patch me up. but the pain in my side still throbbed, a constant reminder of how close we had come to failing. I lay on a worn-out couch, staring at the ceiling, while Kara sifted through the data we had stolen. "What did we get?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Kara didn't answer right away, her eyes glued to the screen. After a moment, she exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "It's worse than I thought." "What do you mean?" She turned the screen toward me, showing a cluster of files marked Cycle Protocol. "Oblivion isn't just about rewriting reality. It's about controlling time itself. These cycles, they're loops. Nexus is running simulations of the world over and over again, resetting things every time they don't go according to plan." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process what she was saying. "You're telling me we've been through this before?" Kara's face was grim. "Not just us. The entire world. Nexus has been experimenting with these cycles for years, resetting reality every time something goes wrong. And now they're ready to lock it in, to create a final version where they control everything." My blood ran cold. Nexus wasn't just trying to erase us. They were trying to trap the world in an endless loop, a reality where they held all the power, forever. "We have to stop them," I said, the weight of the situation pressing down on me like never before. "No matter what it takes." Kara nodded, determination in her eyes. "We will. But we're going to need Cypher. And we're going to need an army." As the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the safe house walls, I knew there was no turning back. We were in a fight for the future, for reality itself. And if Nexus had its way, we wouldn't even remember what we had lost. But we weren't going to let them win. Not this time. The days blurred together after that, each one filled with urgency and the constant threat of being discovered. Kara and I worked in silence most of the time, both of us consumed by the gravity of what we had uncovered. Oblivion wasn't just a tool to control minds or erase identities. It was a weapon capable of trapping humanity in an endless cycle of Nexus's design, where every rebellion, every flicker of resistance, could be reset and erased. It felt impossible to grasp. My mind kept circling back to the same terrifying question: had we lived this exact reality before? Was every failure, every death, just part of another cycle we were doomed to repeat? But dwelling on it wouldn't save us. I had to stay focused. The stolen data sat in front of us like a jigsaw puzzle, and Kara had been chipping away at it for hours, deciphering Nexus's encrypted files and trying to uncover their next move. We needed to strike before they could lock Oblivion into place. Before they could turn the world into a loop they controlled forever. "This piece right here," Kara muttered, tapping on her tablet as lines of code flashed on the screen. "It's a command structure for resetting the cycle. Nexus triggers it every time they want to start over. But the cycles only reset when something goes wrong. It looks like they're fine-tuning reality until it meets their perfect vision." I glanced over her shoulder, trying to make sense of it. "So, they're running simulations. What happens when they get it right? They stop the cycle. Everything is locked in place. No more resets, no more do-overs." Kara's face was grim. "And whatever version of reality they choose will be the final one." The weight of her words hit me hard. A world shaped entirely by Nexus, with no chance to escape, to rebel. It wasn't just about controlling information anymore. They were playing God. I stood up, pacing the cramped room, my thoughts racing. "We need to take out their ability to reset. If we can disrupt that, maybe we can break the cycle." Kara didn't look up from the screen. "Easier said than done. Nexus has fail-safes built into everything. They're not stupid, they know we're coming for them." I stopped pacing and faced her. "Then we need to be unpredictable. Do something they won't see coming." Kara finally met my eyes, a flicker of understanding passing between us. Cypher. It was the only play we had left. Cypher had been off-grid for too long, and if anyone could help us navigate Nexus's labyrinth of security and fail-safes, it was him. But getting to Cypher was easier said than done. He was a ghost, and we'd been sending out pings for days with no response. "He'll come through," Kara said, almost to herself. "He has to." but I wasn't so sure. Cypher had his own agenda, his own reasons for staying in the shadows. And as much as I hated to admit it, there was a chance that Cypher didn't care about stopping Nexus anymore. Maybe he had moved on. Or maybe Nexus had already gotten to him. Still, there was no other option. We had to keep moving, keep pushing forward, even if that meant relying on an unpredictable wildcard like Cypher. That night, we received the first sign of life. It was subtle, a flicker on one of the encrypted channels we'd been monitoring, a signal that could have easily been missed. But Kara caught it. She jumped up from the terminal, eyes wide, and motioned for me to come over. "It's him," she whispered. "It's Cypher." I leaned over her shoulder, watching as the screen lit up with a string of code, followed by a message. It was brief, cryptic, and completely in Cypher's style. "Meet me where the world ended. Midnight. No later." I frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" Kara stared at the message for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "Where the world ended? It's got to be a reference to something. Someplace specific." I nodded, running through possibilities in my mind. "A landmark? Some event?" Then it hit me. There was one place that had been the site of a major event, the kind of thing someone like Cypher would refer to as the end of the world. "The blackout," I said suddenly, my voice low. "When the power grid went down a few years ago. It caused chaos, cities were plunged into darkness. A lot of people called it the end of the world back then." Kara's eyes lit up with understanding. "Of course. The central power station where the blackout started. That's where Cypher wants to meet." It made sense. The old power station had been abandoned after the blackout, left to rot on the edge of the city. It was a perfect spot for a clandestine meeting, isolated, forgotten, and symbolic in its own twisted way. Cypher always did have a flair for the dramatic. "Midnight," Kara repeated, glancing at the clock. "We've got a few hours." We spent the next hour preparing for the meet, gathering what little gear we had left. I could feel the tension radiating off Kara. Her usual calm, collected demeanor was cracking at the edges. This was it. The point where everything would either fall into place or fall apart. As we headed out into the night, the city felt more suffocating than ever. Nexus's presence was everywhere, in the glowing advertisements, the cameras that lined the streets, the drones that hovered above, scanning for any sign of resistance. They owned this place. Every step we took felt like we were walking deeper into their territory, a reminder that we were living on borrowed time. But the power station was different. As we reached the outskirts of the city, the lights faded behind us, and the towering remains of the old structure loomed ahead. It was a husk of what it once was, crumbling and forgotten, covered in graffiti and overgrown weeds. The silence here was thick, broken only by the occasional hum of distant power lines. We waited in the shadows, crouched behind a broken wall, scanning the area for any sign of Cypher. Midnight was fast approaching, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I hadn't seen Cypher in years, not since the early days of the movement. Back then, he'd been the one pulling the strings, the mastermind behind everything we did. But people change. Time wears you down, and I wasn't sure if the Cypher we were about to meet was the same man I remembered. A sharp crack echoed through the still air, a footstep. I tensed, reaching for the knife at my belt, but Kara motioned for me to stay still. She had spotted him before I did. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with a practiced ease that sent a chill down my spine. Cypher. Even in the darkness, there was no mistaking him. He hadn't changed much, tall, lean, with a face that betrayed nothing. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and when they landed on me, I felt like he could see right through me. "You actually showed up," Cypher said, his voice low, but carrying enough authority to make it clear he was still in control of the situation. "Didn't have much of a choice," I said, stepping forward. "We need your help." Cypher's lips twitched into a half-smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Help? That's funny coming from you, Lucian. Last I checked, you were the one who decided to go off the grid, ignore my warnings." His words stung, but I kept my face neutral. Things have changed. Nexus is too close to locking in oblivion. They're running cycles, Cypher, loops of reality. We're living in one right now. If we don't stop them, there won't be another chance. For a moment, Cypher said nothing. He just watched me, his gaze unreadable. Then he glanced at Kara. You're with him now? Kara met his gaze steadily. I'm in this fight, same as you. And right now, we're all that stands between Nexus and total control. Cypher seemed to consider this for a long moment. Then he nodded, slowly. All right. I've been watching, waiting for the right time to step in. But you're right, oblivion is accelerating. And if we don't act now, it'll be too late. I felt a surge of relief, but Cypher wasn't done. There's a piece of this you're missing, he said, his tone serious. Oblivion isn't just a tool for controlling time. It's part of something much bigger. Something Nexus has been working on for decades. Kara frowned. What do you mean? Cypher's eyes darkened. Oblivion isn't the endgame. It's just one layer of the system. Nexus is building something they call the continuum. It's not just about rewriting time, it's about creating a permanent, self-sustaining reality where they hold absolute power. They're planning to merge the digital and physical worlds into one, and oblivion is the key to making that happen. My blood ran cold. A digital reality? Like a simulation? Not a simulation, Cypher corrected. A fusion. They're using oblivion to blur the lines between what's real and what's artificial. Once they control that line, they'll control everything. People, places, history, none of it will be distinguishable from what's real. And Nexus will hold the keys. I stood there, frozen, as the full scope of what Cypher had just said sank in. Oblivion wasn't just about controlling time. It was a stepping stone towards something far more insidious. The fusion of reality and simulation, the creation of a world where Nexus could rewrite everything at will, without anyone being the wiser. If they succeeded, there would be no escaping their control. No revolution, no rebellion, no truth left to fight for. Everything would be malleable, a construct of Nexus's vision. Kara looked as shaken as I felt. How do we stop something like that? Cypher's gaze hardened. You don't. Not with a single move, anyway. Nexus has planned for every scenario, every possible countermeasure. They know exactly how to neutralize threats, especially now that they've fine-tuned oblivion. But, he trailed off, his sharp eyes narrowing as he considered something. There's one vulnerability we can exploit, one they haven't accounted for. I stepped forward, my pulse quickening. What is it? Cypher glanced around, making sure we weren't being watched or followed, before speaking. Oblivion relies on an anchor, something that tethers it to the real world. It's the only way they can manipulate reality without losing control. If we can find that anchor, we can disrupt the entire system. It won't be a permanent fix, but it'll give us time to dismantle their infrastructure from the inside. The anchor, I repeated, trying to wrap my head around it. What exactly is it? A server? A piece of hardware? Cypher's expression darkened. It's a person. Kara and I exchanged shocked glances. A person? Kara asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. You're saying someone's tied to oblivion, like a human anchor? Cypher nodded. Nexus didn't build oblivion on pure code. It's a hybrid system, reliant on both technology and human consciousness. They found a way to merge the two, to bind a person's mind to the code itself. That person, whoever they are, is the key to Nexus's entire operation. Without them, oblivion falls apart. I stared at Cypher, stunned by the revelation. So what do we do? Find this person and, free them? Cypher hesitated, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. That's the thing, Lucian. We don't know what will happen if we sever the connection. It could destroy them. Or it could destroy oblivion. There's no way to be sure. A heavy silence settled over us. the weight of the decision looming large. I felt torn between the moral implications of Cypher's plan and the desperation of our situation. If this person, this human anchor, was the only thing keeping Oblivion running, did we really have a choice? Could we justify sacrificing them to save the world from Nexus's control? We can't just kill them, Kara said, her voice firm but strained. We need to find another way. Cypher's face hardened. There may not be another way. Nexus has made sure that this person is so deeply integrated into Oblivion that freeing them might be impossible. But if we do nothing, we're condemning billions to live in a false reality, controlled by Nexus. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a vice. I wanted to believe there was another solution, a way to stop Nexus without destroying an innocent life. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized we were running out of time and options. We don't even know who the anchor is, I said, trying to buy myself more time to think. How do we find them? Cypher looked at me with a strange, unreadable expression. I do. My heart skipped a beat. What? You know who it is? Cypher's gaze flicked to Kara for a brief second, then back to me. Yes. But it's not going to be easy. Nexus has them locked down in one of their most secure facilities. They're not just protecting this person, they're hiding them. If we want to get to them, we're going to need help. Kara crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. And who exactly is going to help us? You know as well as I do that we're practically on our own. Cypher's lips curled into a grim smile. Not entirely. There's a group I've been in contact with. Old friends of yours, Kara. They've been laying low for years, biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. Kara's eyes widened in realization. You mean the collective? I looked between them, confused. The collective? Kara nodded, her expression filled with both hope and caution. They were part of the early resistance against Nexus, but after the crackdown, they went underground. I thought they'd disbanded. They didn't, Cypher said. They'd been gathering intel, building resources, waiting for someone to give them a reason to come out of the shadows. And you two just gave them that reason. My mind raced. If we could unite with the collective, it would increase our chances of success tenfold. They had the manpower, the tech, the networks we needed. But it would also paint an even bigger target on our backs. Nexus would come after us with everything they had. When do we meet them? I asked. Cypher checked his watch, his voice steady. Tomorrow night. They'll make contact at an old factory outside the city. Be ready, they're not the trusting type. Kara and I exchanged a look. We were about to jump into something much bigger than we had anticipated. But at this point, we had no choice. Nexus was tightening the noose, and if we didn't act fast, there would be no world left to save. The next evening, we arrived at the abandoned factory Cypher had directed us to. It was a crumbling, graffiti-covered structure on the outskirts of the city, far from the eyes of Nexus's surveillance. The air was thick with tension as we waited in the shadows, our breaths quiet and our senses heightened. They'll be here soon, Cypher murmured, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. Stay sharp. Kara and I kept close to the wall, our hearts pounding in unison. My mind was racing with possibilities, with what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. If the collective really was as powerful as Cypher said, then maybe, just maybe, we had a fighting chance. But if this was a trap? The sound of footsteps echoed through the factory's cavernous interior, followed by low voices. Cypher straightened, signaling for us to stay put. A group of figures emerged from the darkness, their faces obscured by hoods and masks. They moved with purpose, their movements quick and precise, like soldiers trained for this kind of covert operation. One of the figures stepped forward, pulling back their hood to reveal a sharp-featured woman with piercing eyes. She looked at Cypher, then at us, her expression unreadable. Cypher, she said, her voice low and measured. You brought friends. These are the ones I told you about, Cypher replied. Lucian and Kara. They've got what we need to bring Nexus down. The woman's gaze lingered on me for a moment, as if she were assessing whether I was worth trusting. After a tense silence, she nodded. We've been waiting a long time for this. Kara stepped forward cautiously. So, you're the collective? I thought you'd gone dark. The woman smirked. We did. But we've been watching, waiting for the right moment. Nexus is about to make their final move, and if we don't act now, there won't be another chance. I swallowed, my throat dry. You know about Oblivion, then? More than you realize, she said, her expression hardening. Nexus has been using Oblivion to manipulate reality for years. But they're getting bolder. And if they succeed in merging the digital and physical worlds, we're all as good as dead, or worse, trapped in their fabricated reality forever. She gestured to the group behind her. We're ready to fight. But we need something from you. I frowned. What is it? Her eyes narrowed. We need access to the mainframe. The heart of Nexus. Without that, we're just taking shots in the dark. Kara exchanged a look with me. That's why we're here. Cypher says he knows where the human anchor is. The person tied to Oblivion. If we can reach them, we can disrupt the whole system. The woman's expression grew more serious. Then we move tonight. A cold chill ran down my spine. There was no turning back now. The final battle against Nexus was looming, and everything we'd fought for, everything we'd lost, was about to come to a head. The future of reality itself was on the line, and we were walking straight into the heart of the storm. The tension in the air was palpable as we stood in the shadow of the abandoned factory, the collective members forming a tight circle around us. Their expressions were hard, resolute. We all knew what was at stake. With each passing moment, the clock ticked down to Oblivion's activation, and Nexus would soon tighten its grip on reality itself. The woman who had introduced herself as the leader of the collective stepped forward, her presence commanding as she looked each of us in the eye. My name is Iris, she said, her voice steady. And if we're going to succeed tonight, we need to be coordinated. The key to taking down Nexus lies in a multi-pronged attack. First, we find the anchor, then we disrupt their ability to manipulate reality. Do you have a plan? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the weight of the moment pressing on my chest. Iris nodded, glancing at her team. We've been tracking Nexus's operations. We know they're housing the anchor in a facility near the heart of the city, one that's heavily fortified. The layout is complicated, but I believe we can breach their defenses if we act quickly and silently. I felt my heart race. How do we get inside? One of our operatives has already planted malware in their security system. Iris explained, her confidence radiating through the group. It'll create a brief window for us to infiltrate undetected. But we have to be in and out within 20 minutes. After that, the system will reset, and we'll have no way to access the anchor. 20 minutes, Kara repeated, her brow furrowing in concentration. That's not much time to locate a person and free them. I know, Iris said, her voice firm. But we have to trust each other. This isn't just about the anchor, it's about everyone they've trapped in their cycles. The longer we wait, the more people will fall under Nexus's control. We're not just fighting for ourselves anymore, we're fighting for everyone. The gravity of her words settled over us like a shroud. I looked at Kara, seeing the determination in her eyes, and felt the spark of hope reignite within me. If we succeeded, we could dismantle Nexus's entire operation and reclaim our reality. Let's move, Iris said, turning on her heel and leading us out of the factory. We slipped into the shadows, our movements calculated and precise, each step carrying us closer to the confrontation we had long dreaded yet needed to face. The city loomed ahead, its skyline a jagged silhouette against the night sky. We traveled through the alleys, keeping to the darkness as the glowing advertisements buzzed overhead, casting an eerie glow that painted everything in stark contrast. Every corner we turned felt like a reminder of the oppressive hold Nexus had on this place. As we approached the facility, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. Iris pointed out the entrance, an imposing structure flanked by guards and high-tech security cameras. That's our way in, she whispered, her voice steady despite the danger that lay ahead. Is the malware ready? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, a cocktail of fear and excitement. "It will activate in less than a minute," Iris replied. "Just stay close and follow my lead. If we can make it through the first layer of security, we'll be able to reach the anchor before the alarms go off." We gathered our gear, positioning ourselves in the shadows as we prepared for the breach. Time felt suspended, each second dragging out into eternity as we waited for the signal. Finally, the screen on Iris's wrist buzzed, indicating that the malware had triggered. "Go!" she hissed. We moved in a synchronized rush, dashing toward the entrance. As we approached the door, a flicker of lights caught the attention of the guards, their heads snapping in our direction. My heart leapt into my throat as I prepared for the worst. "Get down!" Iris shouted, and we dove behind a wall just as the guards began to move toward us. "Move! Move!" I urged, adrenaline coursing through my veins. We dashed around the side of the building, avoiding the guards as we pressed onward, our hearts racing in time with our footsteps. The first layer of security fell away as we reached the door. Iris worked quickly, her fingers flying over the keypad as she hacked the lock. "I need a few seconds," she grunted, her focus unwavering despite the chaos around us. The door clicked open just as the guards began to shout into their radios, their voices growing louder. "They're in! Lock down the perimeter! Let's go!" I urged, pushing through the door and into the facility. The interior was a sterile white, a stark contrast to the darkness outside. Flickering fluorescent lights buzzed above us, casting unsettling shadows across the halls. I could feel the weight of the facility pressing down on us, like a predator stalking its prey. "Follow me," Iris said, her voice steady as she led us down a narrow corridor. "We need to get to the central hub." As we moved, the sound of footsteps echoed behind us. I glanced over my shoulder, anxiety creeping in. The guards were closing in. "Hurry!" Kara urged, her eyes wide with determination. We dashed through the facility, our breaths quickening as we navigated the maze of hallways. I could hear the guards shouting, their footsteps growing louder as they pursued us. I could almost feel the cold grip of fear clutching at my heart, threatening to overtake me. "Left!" Iris shouted suddenly, leading us into a side corridor. We followed her, adrenaline fueling our legs as we pressed onward. We needed to reach the central hub. If we could find the anchor, we might still have a chance. The corridor opened up into a large room, filled with screens and technology one had never seen before. The hum of machines surrounded us, a cacophony of noise that felt both foreign and ominous. "There it is!" Iris exclaimed, pointing to a central console bathed in blue light. "That's the mainframe. We need to access it to find the anchor." I rushed to the console, my heart racing as I scanned the interface. "What do I do?" I asked, glancing back at Iris. "Use the access codes I gave you," she said urgently. "It will show you where the anchor is located." I punched in the codes, my fingers trembling with anticipation. The screen flickered to life, revealing a digital map of the facility, pulsing with red dots indicating security measures and patrol routes. "There!" I pointed, my breath catching in my throat. "That's where they're holding the anchor." Iris nodded, her expression serious. "We have to get there now. They're about to lock down the facility, and once that happens, we're trapped." As I prepared to leave the console, I felt a sudden surge of panic. Wait, what if the anchor is unconscious or incapacitated? How do we extract them? "We'll have to improvise," Iris said, determination etched on her face. "But we can't think about that now. We have to move." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway, growing closer. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that our time was running out. "Go! Now!" Iris shouted, and we sprinted out of the room, racing down the corridor toward the anchor's location. As we ran, the adrenaline surged through my veins, but I could feel the weight of uncertainty growing heavier. What if we weren't able to save them? What if Nexus had anticipated our every move? We turned the final corner and skidded to a halt in front of a heavy door, its surface slick and metallic. "This is it," I said, my heart racing. "Stand back," Iris ordered, moving forward to hack the lock. Her fingers danced over the panel, and after a tense moment, there was a click. The door swung open with a soft hiss. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and a figure lay slumped in the center, restrained by wires and cables that snaked around their body. My heart sank at the sight, a wave of dread washing over me as I approached. The person was pale, their face gaunt and drained of color. They looked unconscious, but I couldn't tell if they were still alive. "We have to get them out of here," I said, panic rising in my chest. Iris moved swiftly, reaching for the restraints. "Help me," she urged, and together we began to pull at the wires, struggling to free the anchor. Kara stood guard at the door, her eyes scanning the hallway for any signs of the guards. "Hurry! We don't have much time!" As we fought to free the anchor, I felt a sense of urgency mounting. We needed to succeed. We had come too far to fail now. Finally, with one last pull, the restraints fell away, and the figure slumped into my arms. I held my breath as I assessed the anchor. Their eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment, our gazes locked. "Who are you?" they murmured, their voice weak and barely audible. "I'm Lucian," I said, feeling an overwhelming surge of determination. "We're here to save you. You're going to be all right." But just as I spoke, the alarms began to blare, echoing through the facility like a death knell. My heart dropped. We were out of time. "Let's go!" Iris shouted, already moving toward the door. "We need to get out now!" I hoisted the anchor's body onto my shoulder, struggling to support their weight as we sprinted down the corridor. The alarms blared in a relentless cacophony, and I could hear the guards shouting behind us, their footsteps echoing ominously in the distance. "Lucian, we have to move faster," Kara urged, her voice filled with urgency. I nodded, my adrenaline spiking as we rounded the corner, heading back toward the mainframe room. The path was a blur, each step a race against time, the echoes of our pursuers growing closer. "Stay together!" Iris shouted, glancing back over her shoulder, her expression fierce and resolute. "We can't split up. If we do, they'll pick us off one by one." As we turned another corner, I felt the weight of the anchor shift, their bodies slumping against me. I can't hold on," they gasped, their voice barely audible over the chaos. "Just a little longer," I urged, pushing through the fatigue. "We're almost there." Finally, we reached the mainframe room, and I shoved the door open with my shoulder, barely managing to keep my balance as I stumbled inside. Iris was already working at the console, typing furiously as she accessed the security feeds. "Cameras are locked out for a few seconds," she said, glancing up at us. "But we have to hurry. They'll be here any moment." Kara moved to assist Iris, while I lowered the anchor to the floor. Their eyes were fluttering closed again, their breaths shallow and uneven. I crouched beside them, trying to keep them conscious. "Stay with me," I said, squeezing their hand. "We're going to get you out of here. Just hold on." "Who are you?" the anchor repeated, their voice weaker now. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. "We're the good guys. We're here to stop Nexus. You're going to help us." A flicker of recognition crossed their eyes, and I could see their strength waning. I can feel it," they whispered, their gaze drifting toward the console. "Oblivion, it's connected to me. If you disrupt it, it could freeze so many." "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of their words. "But first, we need to get you out of here. Can you walk?" I can try," they murmured, but I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. Just then, the door shook as a heavy thud echoed through the room, followed by shouts from the guards. "They're inside! Move, move! Time's up!" Iris shouted, turning back to us. "We need to go, now!" Kara and I exchanged a determined look. "On 3, I said, preparing to lift the anchor again. 1, 2, 3. We hoisted them back onto my shoulder, their body resting heavily against me. "I'm sorry," they murmured, their voice barely a whisper. "Don't apologize," I said, my heart pounding with urgency. "Just hang on." We'll figure this out. Iris opened the door cautiously, peering out into the dimly lit corridor. All clear for now, she said. But we have to move quickly. There's an exit on the other side of this floor. We rushed through the door, moving with urgency as we navigated the halls. The sound of guards echoed behind us, the tension hanging thick in the air. Left! Iris shouted, and we veered in that direction, the sound of our footsteps echoing against the sterile walls. Just as we turned the corner, we were met with a group of guards, their weapons drawn and ready. Stop right there! One of them shouted, raising his gun. Run! Iris screamed, and we sprinted forward just as shots rang out, the bullets ricocheting against the walls behind us. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I ducked, barely avoiding the shots. Keep moving! I yelled, pushing myself to run faster, my legs burning with effort. Kara took the lead, her eyes darting for an escape route. This way! She shouted, leading us into a small room off to the side. We stumbled inside, and I dropped the anchor gently to the ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. What now? I asked, my mind racing. We need a plan, Iris said, her voice steady even in the chaos. We can't fight them head on. We need a distraction. Can we disable their weapons? I suggested, glancing around the room for anything we could use. If we can create a diversion. I can try to hack into their systems from here, Iris said, moving toward a console in the corner. But I'll need a few minutes. Do it, Kara said, her voice firm. We'll hold them off. The door rattled as the guards outside began to push through. My heart raced as I glanced at the anchor, who lay on the ground, their breathing shallow. Stay with us, I said, trying to keep their focus. We're almost out of this. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of guards stormed in. Get down! One of them shouted, raising his weapon. Now! Iris yelled, her fingers flying over the console. I leaped forward, ready to tackle the nearest guard as Kara pulled out a small EMP device from her bag. Stand back! She shouted, tossing it into the center of the room. The EMP detonated with a sharp crack, and the lights flickered before going out entirely. A low hum filled the air as the guards staggered, their weapons sputtering and failing. Go! Iris shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. We need to move now! We rushed toward the door, the darkness wrapping around us like a cloak. I could hear the guards shouting in confusion, but we pushed past them, adrenaline surging as we raced down the corridor. Follow me! Kara shouted, leading us toward a set of emergency exit doors at the end of the hallway. The doors swung open as we burst through, the cool night air hitting us like a wave of relief. I felt my heart soar as we stepped outside, but I knew we couldn't stop yet. Keep going! Iris urged, her voice filled with determination. We sprinted across the empty parking lot, the distant sound of alarms fading behind us as we made our way to a nearby alley. This way! I shouted, guiding us down a narrow path between two buildings. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, but I pushed onward, my heart racing with the effort. We had to escape. We had to save the anchor. Finally, we reached the end of the alley and emerged onto a quieter street. The city was alive with movement, the bright lights flickering around us as we ran. We need a place to hide, Iris said, scanning the area. Somewhere they won't think to look. Over there! Kara pointed to an old warehouse, its door slightly ajar. We can get inside. We rushed toward the warehouse, slipping through the door just as we heard shouts behind us. The guards were closing in, their voices loud and threatening. Inside, the warehouse was dark and dusty, filled with old machinery and crates. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath, while Iris rushed to find a way to secure the door. We can't stay here long, she said, her voice tense. They'll come looking for us. Is the anchor going to be okay? I asked, glancing down at the unconscious figure slumped against the wall. Iris knelt beside the anchor, checking their pulse and breathing. They need medical attention, she said, her voice firm. But right now, we need to keep them safe. Kara rifled through her bag, pulling out a first aid kit. I can help, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos outside. As Kara worked to stabilize the anchor, I felt a surge of hope. We had escaped Nexus's clutches, but we still had a long way to go. The battle was far from over, and I could feel the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on us. Once we regroup, we need to figure out our next move, Iris said, looking between us. We have to disrupt Oblivion before it's too late. Do you think they know we escaped? I asked, my heart pounding. They'll know soon enough, Iris replied. But for now, we've bought ourselves a little time. Let's use it wisely. As I watched Kara work diligently to save the anchor, I realized that we were in this together. Whatever Nexus threw our way, we would face it as a team. We would fight to reclaim our reality and free those trapped in Oblivion. Are you ready? Iris asked, her voice steady as she looked at both of us. I nodded, determination coursing through my veins. Let's do this. We had come too far to turn back now. The battle against Nexus awaited us, and we were ready to fight. We gathered ourselves, preparing for the next phase of our mission, knowing that the fight for our future, and for the world, was only just beginning. In the dim light of the warehouse, a sense of urgency hung in the air like a thick fog. We had only a fleeting moment to catch our breath before we plunged back into the chaos. The anchor lay unconscious, their face pale but tranquil, as Kara continued her work to stabilize them. The weight of our situation pressed down on my shoulders, a relentless reminder of the danger we faced from Nexus. Lucian, keep watch at the door, Iris said, her voice firm and commanding. We can't afford to be caught off guard again. I nodded, moving to the entrance and peering through the cracks in the door. The street outside was eerily quiet, the sounds of the city reduced to a faint hum in the background. It was hard to believe that just moments ago, we had been fleeing for our lives. Now, the shadows of the warehouse felt like a sanctuary, albeit a temporary one. What do we do next? Kara asked, her brow furrowed as she worked. We can't stay here indefinitely. I turned my attention back to them. We need to regroup and figure out our next move. If we're going to disrupt Oblivion, we need a plan. Iris stepped beside me, her expression thoughtful. There are two key components to our strategy. We need to identify where Nexus is controlling Oblivion and find a way to sever that connection. It's a massive network, and the only way we can do it is to infiltrate their main server. Can we get access to the server? I asked, my mind racing. I doubt they're going to let us waltz in after what just happened. There's a secondary access point, an older server facility that they'd neglected. Iris replied, her voice steady. It's less protected. If we can reach it, we may be able to disrupt their system from the inside. But we need to move quickly. The longer we wait, the more time they have to tighten their security. What about the anchor? Kara asked, glancing down at the figure, who was beginning to stir. We'll take them with us, Iris said firmly. If Oblivion is connected to their consciousness, they'll be crucial in severing that link. I could see that Kara was hesitant. But they can barely stay conscious. How can we expect them to help us? If we can get them to the secondary server, they might be able to interface with it and disrupt the system from there. Iris insisted. We can't leave them behind. They are only linked to the heart of Nexus's operation. The anchor stirred, their eyelids fluttering as they fought to regain consciousness. I knelt beside them, concern etched on my face. Hey, stay with us, I said gently, trying to keep them alert. We need your help. Can you hear me? They blinked a few times, finally focusing on me. Lucian? Their voice was shaky but clear, laced with a determination that surprised me. What happened? We rescued you from Nexus, I said, keeping my voice steady. But we need to move. Iris has a plan, but we need you with us. Are you ready? I think so, they replied, their voice gaining strength. What do you need me to do? Iris leaned closer, her eyes filled with urgency. We need you to connect to the secondary server once we get there. You'll help us disrupt Oblivion from the inside. It's going to take all of us working together. The anchor nodded slowly, determination flickering in their gaze. Okay. I'll do it. Let's get you up, I said, helping them to their feet. They wobbled slightly, but I steadied them, feeling the strength radiating from their resolve. As we gathered ourselves, I could hear the distant sounds of the city returning to life outside the warehouse. The urgency of our mission pressed down on me, and I felt a fierce sense of determination swell within. We were a team now, bound by a common purpose. Iris glanced at me, her expression resolute. We need to move now. Follow my lead and stay close. We crept out of the warehouse, the cool night air brushing against our skin. The street was empty, the silence eerie as we stepped into the shadows. The chaos of the facility was behind us, but I knew that the danger was far from over. As we navigated through the maze of alleyways, I felt the weight of our mission settling into place. We were fighting against a formidable enemy, and every second counted. The map of Nexus's network played through my mind, the stakes becoming clearer with each passing moment. Here, Iris whispered, leading us toward an unmarked door hidden behind a dumpster. This is the access point. I glanced back at the anchor, who was breathing more steadily now, their determination visible. Are you ready? I asked. Let's do this, they replied, their voice strong. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. The air grew cooler as we descended, the faint smell of mildew and dust filling our lungs. Stay alert, Iris warned, her voice barely above a whisper. Nexus could be monitoring this area. At the bottom of the stairs, we emerged into a dimly lit corridor, the walls lined with flickering fluorescent lights. I could hear the soft hum of machinery in the distance, a constant reminder of the technology that held the city in its grasp. Over there, Iris pointed toward a large door at the end of the hallway. That's the server room. As we approached, I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment we would either succeed or fail. I glanced at Kara and the anchor, seeing their determination mirrored in their eyes. Iris reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It's locked, she said, frustration creeping into her voice. Let me try, I said, stepping forward. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the security panel beside the door. I had learned a few tricks during my time in the collective, and hacking into the lock felt like second nature. With a few quick moves, I was able to bypass the security. The door clicked open, revealing a room filled with rows of servers, blinking lights illuminating the space like stars in a dark sky. We did it! Kara exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. I stepped inside, scanning the room for any signs of danger. Let's get to work. In the center of the room stood a large mainframe, its display glowing with data streams. I felt a sense of urgency rising as I approached it, my fingers itching to dive into the code. Is this the one? I asked, glancing back at the anchor. They stepped forward, determination etched across their face. Yes. I can connect to it. Are you sure you're ready? I asked, concern creeping into my voice. I have to be, they replied, their gaze unwavering. If I don't connect, Oblivion will continue to trap others in their cycles. We can't let that happen. I nodded, feeling the weight of their resolve. Okay, let's do this. As the anchor moved to the mainframe, I watched, my heart racing with anticipation. I could feel the energy in the room shifting, a sense of purpose filling the air. Just a moment, they said, fingers flying over the keyboard as they navigated the intricate system. The screen flickered, lines of code cascading before us like a digital waterfall. The tension in the room mounted as we all stood on edge, waiting for the moment when everything would change. I'm in, the anchor announced, their voice steady despite the chaos around us. The lights flickered overhead, and I could feel the vibrations of the machinery beneath my feet. What do you see? Iris asked, her voice filled with urgency. Oblivion is tied to this mainframe, they explained. If I can sever the connection, it will disrupt Nexus's hold on the entire system. Do it, I urged, feeling the adrenaline pumping through my veins. The anchor focused intently, fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard. I watched as the data on the screen began to shift, the streams of information changing in response to their commands. "I can feel it," they murmured, their voice a mix of concentration and determination. "It's like I'm reaching into the core of their system." Just then, the lights in the room flickered again, and I could hear the distant sounds of footsteps echoing through the facility. "They're coming!" Kara shouted, panic rising in her voice. "Keep working," Iris commanded, her voice steady. "We need to buy them time." I turned to the door, heart racing as I prepared to defend our position. "We can't let them in. We need to hold them off as long as possible." Kara stepped beside me, her face set in determination. "We'll make sure you have enough time. You just focus on the anchor." I could hear the footsteps growing closer, the tension thickening the air. "We can do this," I said, trying to bolster our resolve. "We're not backing down now." The door rattled as someone slammed against it from the outside. I could hear the guards shouting, their voices filling the hallway. "Open up!" one of them demanded, their tone harsh and threatening. "We know you're in there." The anchor glanced up from the screen, their eyes wide with fear. "I need more time," they said, desperation creeping into their voice. "Just a little longer," I pleaded, my heart racing as the guards continued to pound against the door. "We can't let them in." The sound of wood splintering echoed through the room, sending a shiver down my spine. I could almost feel the guards' determination seeping through the cracks. "Hold the line!" I shouted, gripping a nearby metal pipe for protection. "Whatever happens, we have to protect the anchor. That's our priority." "Stay focused," Iris shouted back, her voice unwavering even as the tension in the room escalated. "We're almost there. Just a few more seconds." With the door buckling under the pressure, I turned back to the anchor, who was intently focused on the screen. "I can't hold them off much longer," I warned. "Can you finish this?" "I'm trying," they replied, fingers dancing over the keyboard as lines of code flashed before their eyes. "There's so much data to sift through. I can feel the connection, but it's stronger than I anticipated." Suddenly, the door burst open, sending a cloud of dust and debris into the air. Several guards stormed into the room, their weapons drawn. "Hands up! Now!" one of them barked, his voice dripping with authority. "Get back!" I shouted, raising the pipe in defiance. I felt the adrenaline surge through my body as I positioned myself protectively in front of the anchor. Kara moved to my side, her expression fierce. "We won't let you take them," she yelled, ready to fight. Before we could react, the guards rushed forward, aiming their weapons at us. "Step aside, or we'll open fire," one of them threatened, eyes narrowed and teeth gritted. In that moment, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. I turned to the anchor, who was still focused on the screen. "Do you have it?" I shouted, desperate for an answer. "I'm almost there," they replied, their voice strained but determined. "Just a little longer." The guards closed in, and I could feel the pressure mounting. "We need to buy them more time," I said to Kara and Iris. "On 3, we make a break for it. We can't let them interfere with the anchor." "What about you?" Iris asked, her expression torn between fear and determination. "I'll hold them off," I said, my heart pounding. "I can distract them. Just focus on getting the anchor to safety." "Are you sure?" Kara asked, concern etched on her face. "Trust me," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "I'll be fine. We've come too far to give up now." Iris nodded, and I could see the resolve hardening in her eyes. "On 3, she said, her voice steady. 1, 2, 3. In a swift motion, I lunged forward, swinging the metal pipe at the nearest guard. The clang of metal against metal rang out in the room, and I felt a rush of adrenaline as I engaged in a fierce struggle. Kara and Iris moved quickly to pull the anchor to safety, and I could see them glancing back, concern etched on their faces. "Go!" I shouted, swinging the pipe again to fend off the guards. "I'll hold them." With a quick glance back at the anchor, I focused on the guards closing in on me. The room erupted in chaos as I fought to maintain my ground. My heart raced as I ducked and dodged their advances, every swing of the pipe sending a surge of adrenaline through me. "Stop resisting!" one of the guards shouted, lunging forward to tackle me. I sidestepped, feeling the rush of wind as he stumbled past me, and I swung the pipe again, hitting another guard in the knee. He fell with a grunt, but I knew I couldn't hold them off forever. "Lucian!" the anchor called from across the room. "I'm almost done!" I turned my attention back to them, the flicker of hope igniting within me. "Just a little longer!" I yelled, deflecting another guard's swing with the pipe. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse as a massive explosion rocked the building, shaking the ground beneath my feet. The guards lost their footing, momentarily stunned by the chaos around them. "What was that?" Kara shouted, eyes wide in disbelief. "It's the distraction," Iris yelled, glancing toward the door. "We need to move, now!" With renewed determination, I swung the pipe one last time, taking out the last guard standing. "Go! Get the anchor!" I shouted, urgency lacing my voice. I could hear the sounds of chaos and alarms blaring outside, and I knew we had limited time. The ground continued to shake beneath us, the tension in the air thick with anticipation. Kara and Iris quickly pulled the anchor to their feet, supporting them as they stumbled slightly. I'm ready!" the anchor gasped, their face a mask of concentration. I nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. "Let's finish this!" The three of us rushed toward the mainframe as the anchor connected with the terminal. Lines of code streamed across the screen, and I watched in awe as they began to interface with the server. "I can feel it!" they exclaimed, their eyes wide with determination. "It's all connected to Oblivion. If I can sever this link, it could bring the whole system down." The air in the room crackled with energy, and I felt a sense of urgency as I stood beside them, ready to protect our progress. "You can do this!" I urged, my heart racing. "Just a little longer!" they shouted, their fingers flying over the keyboard as the screen flickered with data. The ground shook again, and I glanced back at the doorway, where more guards were pushing through. "We don't have much time!" I shouted, feeling the panic rising. "Almost there," the anchor replied, sweat glistening on their forehead. "I can feel the connection weakening. Get ready!" I yelled, my eyes locked on the approaching guards. Just then, the screen flashed a bright red warning, and the anchor's expression turned to one of panic. "No! They're trying to override my connection! Hold them off!" Iris shouted, moving to shield the anchor from the guards. I took a deep breath, raising the pipe again as the guards flooded into the room. "You'll have to get through me first!" I yelled, swinging the pipe wildly, hoping to buy the anchor enough time to finish the task. But they pressed forward, weapons drawn, determined to take us down. "Step aside!" one of the guards shouted. "This is your last chance!" I could feel the weight of their threats bearing down on me, but I refused to back down. "Not happening!" I shouted back, lunging at them with fierce determination. The sound of metal clashing filled the air as I fought to protect my team, each swing fueled by the desire to keep the anchor connected to the server. I could see the tension in the anchor's face, and I knew they needed this time to finish what we had started. Suddenly, there was a bright flash from the terminal as the anchor's fingers flew across the keyboard. "I'm doing it!" they shouted, their voice filled with fierce determination. "I can feel it breaking! Keep going!" I yelled, deflecting another swing from a guard. But just as I thought we were gaining the upper hand, one of the guards managed to land a blow, knocking the pipe from my grasp. I stumbled back, but I quickly regained my footing, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Lucian!" Kara shouted, panic flooding her voice. "I'm fine!" I called out, my heart racing. "Just keep focusing on the anchor!" The guards pressed forward, and I fought back with everything I had left. "You'll have to do better than that," I taunted, trying to buy more time. But just as I felt myself slipping, the anchor shouted, "I'm almost there!" With one last surge of energy, I lunged forward, tackling the nearest guard to the ground. We grappled for a moment, and I could feel the weight of my exhaustion threatening to overwhelm me. "I'm in!" the anchor shouted suddenly, their voice rising above the chaos. I can sever the link! The screen flashed violently, and I could see the data streams reversing, lines of code collapsing upon themselves as the anchor worked to dismantle Nexus's hold. The lights flickered erratically as if the very fabric of their network was coming apart. Hold on! I shouted to my team, fighting with everything I had against the guards trying to pull me away. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room as the overhead lights exploded, showering us with shards of glass. I felt the adrenaline surge in my veins, pushing me to keep fighting even as the chaos surrounded us. Now! The anchor cried, their voice cutting through the noise. Do it now! Iris and Kara moved to shield the anchor as I surged forward, taking out the last of the guards with a swift strike. As I pushed them aside, I turned back just in time to see the anchor hitting the final key on the terminal. A bright flash illuminated the room, blinding us momentarily. The sound of a shattering network filled the air, and I felt the very walls shake around us. Did it work? I shouted, squinting against the light. As the brightness faded, the screens around us flickered and died, one by one. The guards, who had moments before been menacing, now appeared confused and disoriented, their weapons lowered as the chaos of the room began to settle. I think it worked! The anchor exclaimed, breathing heavily, their fingers trembling from the exertion. The screen that had just moments ago displayed a complex array of data was now dark, the connection severed. Get out! We need to move! Iris urged, her voice cutting through the remnants of the chaos. I quickly turned to the remaining guards, whose bewilderment had momentarily left them vulnerable. Let's go! I shouted, ushering Kara and the anchor toward the door. We rushed through the corridor, adrenaline coursing through our veins as we navigated back toward the exit. The loud sirens blared around us, echoing the alarm that had been triggered by our successful disruption of Oblivion. I can't believe we did it! Kara shouted, her eyes shining with a mix of disbelief and triumph. We're not out of the woods yet, I reminded her, glancing back at the guards who were regaining their senses. We need to keep moving! The air felt charged, almost electric, as we barreled through the hallway. Each step echoed our determination to escape, the reality of our victory sinking in even as the danger loomed behind us. The exit was in sight, a faint light spilling into the dark corridor as we pushed onward. Almost there, I urged, feeling the weight of the moment pushing me forward. Just as we reached the door, a figure stepped into our path, a tall, imposing figure clad in black, their face obscured by shadows. It was the same guard from earlier, the one who had been barking orders. You think you can just walk out of here? He snarled, stepping forward with an air of authority. We don't have time for this, I yelled, my heart pounding as I prepared to confront him. But before I could react, Iris stepped forward, a determined glint in her eyes. You're not in control here anymore, she declared, her voice steady and unwavering. Your system is down. You've lost. He hesitated for a moment, uncertainty flashing across his face as the weight of our actions began to sink in. Let us go, the anchor said, their voice surprisingly firm. You know this is over. For a moment, it felt as if time stood still. The guard glared at us, his mind racing as he weighed his options. You think you're heroes? He spat, though there was an underlying tension in his words. No, I replied, stepping closer. We're just people fighting against a corrupt system. Just like you should be. His expression softened for the briefest of moments, as if he could see our resolve. But just as quickly, it hardened again, and he raised his weapon. Step aside, he ordered, or I'll make you regret it. The air grew thick with tension, and I knew this was a pivotal moment. You don't have to do this, I urged, my heart racing. We're not your enemy. Your fight isn't with us, it's with the system that's kept you down. He faltered, his grip on the weapon wavering as uncertainty washed over him. You don't understand, he replied, his voice low. I'm just following orders. This is my job. It's a job that's destroying lives. Kara said, stepping forward with courage. You can choose to be part of something better. Join us. The moment stretched as we stood there, the air thick with possibility. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the doubt fighting against his loyalty to Nexus. I can't just walk away, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Why not? Iris asked, her tone filled with compassion. You can help us dismantle this corruption. We can work together to create something better. The guard took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of the world was crashing down upon him. I'm not sure I can, he said, glancing back toward the darkness of the facility. Maybe you don't have to do it alone, the anchor said softly, stepping forward. You can find your own path. Help us bring this down, and we can fight together for something real. For a moment, it felt as though the world had paused, the chaos outside muted as the guard's mind turned over the possibilities. Finally, he lowered his weapon, a look of resolution crossing his face. Fine, he said, his voice low but steady. You can go. But this isn't over. We don't need it to be, I replied, stepping aside to allow him to pass. We just want a chance to make things right. As the guard backed away, I felt a surge of hope. Perhaps, amidst the chaos and darkness, there was still a chance for change. Let's move, Iris urged, gesturing for us to hurry through the exit. We rushed out into the night air, the cool breeze washing over us like a breath of fresh freedom. The city lights twinkled in the distance, a stark contrast to the turmoil we had just faced. As we stepped into the alleyway, I took a moment to gather my thoughts, still processing what had just happened. Did we really do it? I asked, disbelief tinging my voice. We did, the anchor replied, a smile breaking across their face. Oblivion is down. Nexus's grip is weakening. Kara beamed at us, her excitement infectious. We're free. We actually did it. Iris nodded, her expression fierce. But this is just the beginning. We need to get the word out and rally others to join us. We can't let Nexus regroup. Right, I agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose fill the air. We'll spread the news. We have to ensure that everyone knows they're not alone. As we made our way through the streets, the sense of freedom and hope surged within me. The night felt different somehow, the air charged with a renewed energy. We had faced darkness, but we had emerged stronger, united in our resolve to bring about change. As we navigated the city, I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't felt in a long time. Together, I said, glancing at my friends, we can take down the system that has oppressed us for so long. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone. With determination etched in our hearts, we moved forward into the night, ready to face whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, our victory over Oblivion turned into a rallying cry for many others. With each passing day, we uncovered more secrets hidden beneath the surface of Nexus's operations. People began to gather, forming a collective united by the desire for freedom. We shared our stories, our experiences, and slowly but surely, a movement began to grow. The anchor became an integral part of our team, their connection to Oblivion providing valuable insight into the inner workings of Nexus. With every operation we undertook, we felt ourselves gaining ground against the formidable enemy. As we strategized and planned our next steps, I could see the hope in the eyes of those around us. We were no longer just individuals fighting against the corrupt system. We had become a community, a family. We utilized technology to amplify our voices, spreading awareness through secure channels. The world began to take notice. News outlets reported on our efforts, and people everywhere began to rise against the oppressive forces that had long kept them silent. In the heart of our movement, I found not only friendship but a purpose greater than myself. Together, we were crafting a new narrative, one built on compassion, resilience, and unity. Then came the day when we planned our most significant operation yet, the direct infiltration of Nexus's headquarters. It would be dangerous, but we were ready. We had built our skills and gathered our resources, and we were determined to confront the enemy at their core. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement as we prepared for the mission. Each person had a role to play, and together we strategized, ensuring that we would have every advantage possible. Remember, I said to the group, my voice steady but filled with conviction. This isn't just about taking down Nexus. It's about building a future where we all can thrive. We're not just fighting for ourselves, we're fighting for everyone who has suffered under their control. The night of the operation arrived, and we gathered at the designated location, hearts pounding in anticipation. As the plan unfolded, I felt a sense of unity surrounding us, a bond formed from our shared experiences. We moved swiftly, executing our plan with precision as we infiltrated the heavily guarded headquarters of Nexus. The adrenaline coursed through my veins, pushing me to give my all for the cause. As we navigated the labyrinthine corridors, I felt the weight of our mission pressing down on us. This was our chance to dismantle the heart of the organization that had caused so much pain. With every step, we grew closer to our goal. The energy in the air was palpable, the tension thick as we made our way through the facility. The moments stretched as we faced challenges, but we persevered, drawing strength from each other. Finally, we reached the central control room, a vast expanse filled with screens and equipment, the heart of Nexus's operations. My breath caught in my throat as I took in the sight before us. Now! Iris commanded, and we sprang into action, ready to seize our moment. As we worked to dismantle the servers and gather vital data, I felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. This was more than just a mission, it was a turning point in our fight for freedom. Each keystroke was a blow against the oppressive regime that had dictated our lives for far too long. Get the files we need! I shouted to the anchor, who was already seated at the central console, fingers flying over the keyboard as they accessed the core systems. I'm on it, they replied, their focus unwavering. The screens flickered as data streamed across them, revealing critical information about Nexus's operations, personnel, and illicit activities. Iris and Kara positioned themselves near the entrance, eyes scanning the hallway for any signs of trouble. We'll cover you, Iris said, her voice calm despite the tension. Just make it quick. Almost there, the anchor called, determination etched on their face. I can see the files. If I can extract this data, we'll have everything we need to expose Nexus. A low rumble shook the room, a reminder that time was running out. The alarms blared louder now, signaling our presence within the facility. Lucian, we need to move, Kara urged, glancing anxiously at the door. They'll be here any second. Just a bit longer. I shouted back, my heart racing as I focused on the anchor's work. I could see their determination. This was their moment to shine, and I would do everything to ensure they could complete it. Suddenly, the door burst open, and guards flooded into the room, weapons drawn and eyes filled with fury. Hands in the air! You're surrounded! One of them shouted, their voice booming over the chaos. Go! Now! I yelled to the anchor, moving instinctively to put myself between them and the guards. I could feel the adrenaline surging through me, propelling me into action. The anchor hesitated, eyes wide with fear. I just need a few more seconds. Do it! I urged, swinging my arms to keep the guards at bay. We'll hold them off. You need to finish. Iris and Kara took their positions, ready to fight back against the oncoming guards. We won't let them take you, Iris shouted, her eyes fierce with determination. As the guards closed in, I felt a surge of bravery rush through me. I charged at the first guard, taking him by surprise and tackling him to the ground. The fight was chaotic, with punches thrown and shouts echoing around us. Lucian, look out! Kara yelled, but I was already in the thick of it, grappling with another guard who was trying to flank me. Just keep going! I shouted back, dodging another swing as I caught sight of the anchor still furiously typing. We can't let them stop you! The anchor's voice broke through the noise. I'm almost there. Just a little more. My heart raced as I fought off another guard, adrenaline pushing me to keep going despite the growing exhaustion. I could hear the sounds of battle all around me, but I focused on the anchor, willing them to finish what they had started. Suddenly, There was a bright flash, and the screens flickered violently. "I got it!" the anchor yelled, their face alight with triumph. "I've downloaded the files. Now let's get out of here!" I shouted, feeling a rush of hope surge through me. I knew we had what we needed, but we had to escape before it was too late. With renewed energy, we pushed forward, fighting our way through the guards. "We can't stop now!" I yelled, swinging wildly at anyone who came too close. "Lucian, over here!" Iris shouted, pointing toward a side exit. "We can cut through the maintenance hall!" I nodded, darting in her direction as the anchor followed closely behind. The sounds of chaos faded into the background as we navigated through the narrow corridors, the adrenaline keeping us sharp and focused. "Which way?" Kara asked, glancing back nervously as we reached a fork in the path. "Left!" I shouted, remembering the layout from our earlier reconnaissance. "We'll circle back around." We barreled down the corridor, pushing through the door that led to the maintenance area. The dim light flickered above us, adding to the urgency of our escape. "Almost there!" the anchor panted, determination etched on their face as they glanced back. "We can make it! Just keep moving!" I urged, leading the charge as we made our way through the winding paths. The sound of footsteps echoed behind us, the guards hot on our trail. "Which way now?" Iris called out as we reached another junction. "Down!" I pointed toward a staircase that descended into darkness. "We can lose them in the basement." We rushed down the stairs, my heart pounding with every step. The echoes of our footsteps faded into the depths of the facility as we reached the bottom. "Where to now?" Kara asked, breathless. "We'll need to find an exit," I replied, scanning the area for any signs of escape. "There has to be a way out down here." "Over there!" The anchor pointed toward a faint light seeping through a door at the far end of the hallway. We hurried toward it, pushing through the door and emerging into a small storage room filled with crates and boxes. The light was coming from a set of double doors on the opposite side. "This has to be it," Iris said, rushing toward the doors. "Let's go!" As we reached the doors, I could hear the guards closing in behind us, their shouts growing louder. "Hurry!" I urged, throwing open the doors and leading the way outside. We burst into the night air, the cool breeze hitting us like a wave of relief. The city stretched out before us, illuminated by the glow of streetlights and distant buildings. "Where do we go now?" Kara panted, scanning our surroundings. "Just keep running," I said, adrenaline pushing us forward as we fled from the chaos behind. "We need to get to a safe location and regroup." We sprinted down the street, hearts racing as we put as much distance between ourselves and the Nexus headquarters as possible. The sounds of sirens filled the air, but we pressed on, fueled by the knowledge that we had achieved our mission. Finally, we reached a narrow alleyway, and I gestured for us to duck inside. "We need to lay low for a moment," I said, my breath coming in quick bursts. As we caught our breath, I glanced at the anchor, who was still clutching the device they had used to extract the files. "Did you really get everything?" I asked, my heart racing with anticipation. The anchor nodded, a grin spreading across their face. "Everything we need to expose them is right here," they replied, looking more relieved than I had ever seen them. "Then we've won," Iris said, her voice full of hope. "We have what we need to bring them down." "Yes," I agreed, my heart swelling with pride. "We did this together. But we still have work to do." We took a moment to gather ourselves, sharing relieved glances. Our unity had brought us this far, and I knew it would carry us through whatever came next. As we prepared to head back into the city, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. We were ready to fight back against the darkness, to ensure that our victory would lead to lasting change. "Let's get to work," I said, determination burning in my chest. "This is just the beginning." And as we stepped back into the night, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, I felt a profound sense of hope. Together, we would bring down the system that had oppressed us, one step at a time. Weeks turned into months as we worked tirelessly to expose Nexus's corruption. With the data the anchor had retrieved, we launched a campaign that shook the foundations of the organization. The files revealed a web of deceit, exploitation, and control that resonated with countless others who had suffered under Nexus's regime. Our movement gained momentum as people began to rise against the injustices they had endured. Protests erupted in cities across the nation, and news outlets broadcast our message far and wide. People were no longer afraid to stand up and fight for their rights. Amidst the chaos, I found solace in the friendships we had forged. The bond between us had only deepened as we faced each challenge together. We became a family united by a common purpose, fighting for a world where freedom and justice could thrive. As the movement continued to grow, I took on a leadership role, helping to organize rallies and discussions aimed at mobilizing the masses. We trained others in the skills we had learned, empowering them to take action in their own communities. One evening, as I prepared for a major rally, I sat with the anchor, reflecting on how far we had come. "I never imagined we'd be here," I admitted, a sense of disbelief washing over me. "Neither did I," the anchor replied, a smile spreading across their face. "But look at what we've achieved together. This is just the beginning." Their words filled me with hope. We were creating a movement that resonated with so many people, and I could see the change beginning to take root. As the night of the rally approached, we gathered our supporters, uniting in our mission to reclaim our rights and hold Nexus accountable. We shared our stories, reminding each other of why we fought. The night was electric with energy as we prepared to take the stage. The crowd surged with anticipation, a sea of faces eager for change. As I stood before them, I felt a sense of purpose and unity that transcended everything I had ever experienced. We stood here today not just for ourselves, but for everyone who has ever felt the weight of oppression on their shoulders. I began, my voice steady and resolute. We are a community forged in adversity, rising together to reclaim our freedom and dignity. The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices mingling into a powerful chorus that echoed through the streets. I felt the energy surging around me, a palpable force that fueled my determination. For too long, Nexus has operated in the shadows, hiding their actions behind a facade of power and control. But today, we stand in the light, exposing their lies and demanding accountability. Together, we will dismantle the system that has kept us down, brick by brick. The applause and shouts intensified, and I could see faces lit with hope and determination. This was our moment, our time to be heard. We have gathered evidence, shared our stories, and built a network of allies who refuse to be silenced any longer. This is more than just a fight against a corporation. It's a fight for our future, for the rights of every person who has suffered at their hands. As I spoke, I could feel the collective spirit of those gathered, a community united by a shared purpose. Their faces reflected the struggles they had faced, the sacrifices they had made, and the hope that flickered within them. I gestured toward the anchor, who stood beside me, their expression a mix of pride and determination. "This is my friend, my ally, someone who played a crucial role in exposing the truths that Nexus tried to bury. Together, we can create a world where everyone has the right to live free from fear and manipulation." The crowd cheered, their voices rising like a wave crashing against the shore. In that moment, I realized how far we had come, not just as individuals but as a movement. We will not stop until every person oppressed by Nexus knows they are not alone. I continued, my heart swelling with conviction. We will fight for justice, for accountability, and for the future we deserve. As I concluded my speech, the air crackled with energy. I could see the faces around me shining with newfound courage and resolve. The night was ours, and together, we would forge a path toward change. The days following the rally were a whirlwind of activity. Our movement continued to grow, with more and more people joining our cause. The data we had uncovered fueled protests and discussions across the country, inspiring countless individuals to take a stand against oppression. In the face of mounting pressure, Nexus began to falter. Their attempts to maintain control became desperate as they scrambled to discredit our movement and silence our voices. But each attempt only strengthened our resolve, proving that we were a force to be reckoned with. Our coalition expanded to include activists, former Nexus employees, and everyday citizens who had endured the weight of their oppressive regime. We organized workshops, community meetings, and strategic planning sessions to ensure that our efforts were cohesive and impactful. Every step we took was a testament to our determination to reclaim our rights and restore justice. We shared stories of resilience, reminding one another that we were not alone in our fight. One evening, as we gathered in a community center for a meeting, I took a moment to look around at the faces of my friends and allies. They were a mix of familiar and new, all united by a common purpose. "Look at what we've built together," I said, my voice filled with gratitude. "Each of you has played a vital role in this movement. We are stronger together, and we can achieve incredible things when we unite." The anchor smiled, their eyes reflecting the passion that had fueled our journey. "And this is just the beginning," they said, inspiring everyone to embrace the challenges ahead. As we strategized for the next phase of our campaign, the atmosphere was electric with energy. We had forged a community built on trust and support, and together, we were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. It wasn't long before our efforts culminated in another pivotal moment, an opportunity to confront the leaders of Nexus directly. We had secured a chance to present our findings at a public hearing, a platform to expose their corruption and demand accountability. The day of the hearing arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Our supporters filled the room, their presence a powerful reminder of why we fought. I could feel the weight of our mission pressing on my shoulders, but I also felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. As I prepared to take the stage, I glanced at my friends, each one of them nodding in encouragement. They had been with me through every challenge, and I knew we were in this together. When my turn to speak arrived, I stepped forward, heart pounding in my chest. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. "Today, we stand here not just as individuals but as a community united by a common goal," I began, my voice steady and clear. "We are here to expose the truth about Nexus, to hold them accountable for the harm they have caused, and to demand a future free from their oppression." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to sink in. For too long, Nexus has hidden behind a veil of power, exploiting and manipulating those who are vulnerable. But today, we will shine a light on their actions and demand justice for all who have suffered at their hands. As I continued, I shared the stories of those who had been wronged, the voices of the marginalized echoing in the room. The collective anger and determination in the audience grew, fueling my conviction. "We have the evidence," I declared, my voice rising with passion. "We have the strength of our community. And we will not back down until every person affected by Nexus knows that they are not alone, that justice is possible." As I concluded my speech, the audience erupted into applause, their support washing over me like a wave of hope. I felt a sense of camaraderie, a bond forged through our shared experiences and struggles. The hearing continued, and one by one, our allies took the stage, sharing their own stories and presenting evidence of Nexus's wrongdoings. Each testimony built upon the last, creating a powerful narrative that could not be ignored. In the days that followed, our voices reverberated throughout the country. The hearing became a turning point in our movement, sparking outrage and mobilizing even more people to join our cause. Nexus was forced to confront the consequences of their actions, facing public scrutiny like never before. Our movement had become a beacon of hope for those who had long suffered in silence, and the tide was turning against the oppressive regime that had once seemed invincible. With each passing day, we continued to build momentum, fueled by the belief that change was not only possible but imminent. We expanded our efforts, organizing rallies, workshops, and community discussions that brought people together from all walks of life. I remember standing at the front of a particularly large rally, surrounded by a sea of passionate faces. "This is our moment," I shouted, raising my fist in solidarity. "Together, we are unstoppable. We will not rest until we dismantle the oppressive systems that have held us down for far too long." The cheers that erupted from the crowd felt like a tidal wave of energy, an affirmation of our collective strength and determination. We had transformed our pain into action, and the world was finally taking notice. As the movement gained traction, we found ourselves at the forefront of a broader awakening. The stories of our struggles resonated with others, inspiring them to share their own experiences and join our fight for justice. Through social media, we connected with individuals and groups across the country, forging alliances and creating a network of advocates who were committed to creating change. We developed strategies to engage our communities, empowering them to take action and demand their rights. And then, the unthinkable happened. A few weeks later, a whistleblower from within Nexus came forward, revealing even more shocking details about the organization's corrupt practices and unethical operations. The information he provided corroborated much of what we had been fighting against, giving our movement a powerful boost. With this newfound evidence, we organized a press conference to unveil the truth to the world. The stakes were higher than ever, and I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as we prepared to share our findings. On the day of the press conference, we stood before a crowd of journalists and supporters, ready to expose the truth. As the anchor presented the new evidence, I could feel the weight of our fight pressing down on me. This was our moment to shine, to bring the injustices of Nexus to light. The anchor spoke with clarity and conviction, detailing the findings and highlighting the impact of Nexus's actions on communities across the nation. I could see the reporters scribbling notes, their expressions shifting from skepticism to intrigue. After the anchor finished, I stepped forward, ready to share my own story and the stories of those who had been affected. Today, we stand here not just as activists but as survivors of a system designed to oppress and control us. I began, my voice strong and unwavering. We are here to demand accountability and justice for those who have suffered at the hands of Nexus. We will not be silenced any longer. As I continued, the energy in the room shifted. The passion of our movement resonated with those present, and I could see the spark of change igniting in their eyes. The press conference garnered national attention, bringing our movement into the spotlight. We received support from unexpected corners, including lawmakers and influential figures who were willing to lend their voices to our cause. Within days, protests erupted across the country, fueled by outrage and determination. The momentum was undeniable, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. As our movement gained visibility, we received invitations to speak at conferences, panel discussions, and community events. Each opportunity allowed us to share our story, raise awareness about the injustices perpetrated by Nexus, and galvanize support from a wider audience. The passion we had ignited was contagious, and we were determined to keep the momentum going. One evening, after a particularly successful panel discussion, I sat down with the anchor, Iris, and Kara at a local cafe. The atmosphere was buzzing with excitement, and we were all riding high on the energy of the day. "I can't believe how far we've come," I said, looking around at my friends. "Just a few months ago, we were fighting in the shadows, and now look at us, we're leading a movement." The anchor nodded, their face glowing with pride. "And it's not just us. We have so many people behind us now, all fighting for the same cause. It's incredible." Iris leaned forward, her expression serious. "But we can't lose sight of what we're fighting for. There are still so many people out there who need our help, who are suffering because of Nexus and other organizations like them." Kara sighed, looking thoughtful. "You're right. We have to keep pushing. We've started something, and we can't let it die out. We need to keep raising our voices." "Agreed," I said, feeling a surge of determination. "We need to create a plan for the next phase of our movement. We can't just react to what Nexus is doing, we need to be proactive." As we brainstormed ideas, I felt a sense of clarity. We had built a network, and now it was time to leverage it. We needed to create lasting change, not just for ourselves but for future generations. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as we devised a comprehensive strategy. We organized community forums, educational workshops, and outreach programs designed to empower individuals and provide them with the tools they needed to stand up against oppression. Our message resonated with people from all walks of life. Activists, educators, and community leaders joined our cause, and we began to see real change on the ground. We reached out to local organizations and allied groups, forming coalitions to amplify our voices. Each partnership brought new ideas and fresh perspectives, allowing us to broaden our reach and impact. Then came another turning point, the announcement of a major city-wide rally to demand accountability from Nexus. It was a chance for our movement to culminate in a powerful show of solidarity, and we were determined to make it unforgettable. As the day of the rally approached, we worked tirelessly to ensure everything was in place. We organized speakers, coordinated with local law enforcement to secure permits, and promoted the event through every channel we had. On the day of the rally, the energy in the air was electric. Thousands of people gathered in the city square, holding signs and chanting slogans that echoed our call for justice. I stood on the stage with my friends, looking out at the sea of faces, filled with hope and determination. "Today, we stand united," I shouted into the microphone, my voice ringing out over the crowd. "We are here to demand justice, accountability, and a future free from oppression. Nexus will hear our voices, and they will understand that we will not be silenced." The crowd erupted in cheers, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. I knew that we were making a difference, and the impact of our movement was rippling far beyond what we could see. As speakers took the stage, sharing their own stories and experiences, the atmosphere became charged with emotion. People cried, laughed, and felt the weight of our collective struggles. Each testimony reinforced the importance of our mission and the urgency of our cause. Then, it was my turn to speak again. I stepped up to the microphone, my heart racing with anticipation. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," I began, looking out at the crowd. "We are fighting for every single person who has been harmed by Nexus's greed and corruption. We are fighting for justice for the voiceless, for the marginalized, for those who have suffered in silence for too long." As I continued, I felt the power of the crowd behind me, fueling my words. "Together, we can create a future where no one has to live in fear of exploitation and oppression. Together, we can build a world where justice prevails." The cheers that erupted from the crowd were deafening, a wave of solidarity that resonated in my bones. In that moment, I realized that we were part of something much bigger than ourselves, a movement that would echo through history, shaping the future for generations to come. In the weeks following the rally, the pressure on Nexus intensified. Public scrutiny was at an all-time high, and more whistleblowers came forward with damning evidence of their wrongdoings. The momentum was undeniable, and we felt the tide turning in our favor. With every new revelation, more people began to join our cause. The movement transcended boundaries, and we found allies in unexpected places. Activists from different backgrounds and experiences came together, united by a shared vision of justice and equality. As we continued to push for accountability, I felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment. We were no longer just a small group fighting in the shadows. We had become a powerful force for change, and the world was taking notice. Then came the day when we received the news we had all been waiting for. The government had launched an official investigation into Nexus. The organization was being held accountable for its actions, and the wheels of justice were finally in motion. It was a moment of triumph for our movement, and we celebrated together. But even amidst the joy, I knew our work was far from over. The fight for justice was a long and winding road, and we had to remain vigilant. "Now that we've reached this point, we need to think about the next steps," I said to my friends as we gathered in our community center. "This is a victory, but we can't let our guard down. We need to ensure that this investigation leads to real change." Kara nodded, her expression serious. "We have to keep advocating for policy reforms that prevent organizations like Nexus from operating with impunity. This can't just be a moment, it has to be a movement," the anchor chimed in. "We should also focus on building a support network for the people who have been harmed by Nexus. They need to know they have a voice and a place to turn to for help." "I completely agree," I said, feeling a renewed sense of determination. "Let's create resources and programs that not only address the current issues but also empower individuals to stand up for themselves in the future." We spent the next few weeks outlining our plans, strategizing how we could build on our momentum and ensure that our voices were heard long after the investigation concluded. As we implemented our initiatives, we received overwhelming support from the community. People wanted to be involved, to help in any way they could. It became clear that our movement was more than just a response to Nexus. It was a rallying cry for justice and equality in all aspects of life. And then, just as we had hoped, the day arrived when the results of the investigation were made public. The report confirmed numerous violations and unethical practices, calling for accountability at the highest levels of Nexus's leadership. Our movement had played a crucial role in bringing these injustices to light, and we felt a profound sense of satisfaction as we watched the news unfold. But we knew this was only the beginning. With the report in hand, we organized another rally, this time to demand concrete action and reforms that would protect individuals from exploitation. As we gathered once more in the city square, I took a moment to reflect on our journey. It had been a long and arduous path, filled with challenges and setbacks, but we had persevered. We are here today because we refuse to accept a world where the powerful can exploit the vulnerable. I began, feeling the energy of the crowd surge around me. We stand united in our demand for justice and accountability. The cheers from the crowd resonated in my soul, a reminder that we were part of something greater than ourselves. Together, we were changing the narrative, rewriting the story of oppression into one of empowerment. As I looked around at the faces of my friends and allies, I knew we had built something lasting, a community bound by hope, resilience, and a shared commitment to justice. Let's continue to fight for what's right, I declared, my voice strong and unwavering. Together, we will create a future where everyone can live freely, without fear or oppression. This is our moment, and we will not let it slip away. And with that, I felt the power of our movement surging through me, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. We were unstoppable, and the fight for justice had only just begun. The energy of the rally pulsed through me as the crowd cheered, their voices mingling into a powerful cacophony of hope and determination. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us all, a collective understanding that we were on the brink of significant change. As I stepped down from the stage, the adrenaline of the event coursing through my veins, I was approached by a familiar face, a young woman named Mia, a passionate activist who had become a cornerstone of our movement. She had an infectious enthusiasm that inspired everyone around her. "Did you see the way they reacted?" Mia exclaimed, her eyes shining with excitement. "We're really making waves, you know." "I know," I replied, grinning back at her. "It feels incredible to see so many people coming together for this cause. We're changing lives." But even as I celebrated the progress we had made, a nagging sense of urgency lingered in the back of my mind. The fight against Nexus wasn't over. The real test lay ahead, and we needed to be prepared for the pushback that was sure to come. In the weeks following the rally, I immersed myself in the work ahead. Our coalition had gained considerable traction, but the more we exposed Nexus's corrupt practices, the more aggressive their tactics became. They were a wounded beast, and I could feel their desperation. One evening, as I sat with the Anchor and Kara in our community center, we reviewed our strategies for the coming weeks. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, and I could see the concern etched on my friends' faces. "We need to be strategic about our next steps," I said, leaning over the table piled with documents and plans. "Nexus is going to retaliate. They have resources and influence, and they won't go down without a fight." Kara nodded, her expression serious. "We've already seen their attempts to discredit us. We need to stay focused on our message and not let them sidetrack us with their tactics." The Anchor tapped a pen against the table, deep in thought. "What if we counter their narrative? We should be proactive in sharing our stories and those of the people who have suffered at their hands. Let's show the world the real impact of their actions." "I love that idea," I said, feeling the spark of inspiration ignite. "We could create a series of videos, testimonials from people whose lives have been affected. It would add a personal touch that the media can't ignore." We spent the next few weeks gathering stories from individuals who had been impacted by Nexus, highlighting their struggles and resilience. As we compiled their narratives, I was struck by the sheer strength of the human spirit. Each story was a testament to the power of community, and it fueled my determination to fight even harder. As we began to release these videos online, the response was overwhelming. People shared their own experiences, creating a ripple effect that spread far beyond our immediate circle. The media began to take notice, featuring our videos and amplifying our message. But with every positive step forward, Nexus escalated their attempts to undermine us. They unleashed a smear campaign, targeting our credibility and attacking our personal lives. I received threatening messages online, and whispers circulated through social media. They were attempting to instill fear, hoping to silence our movement through intimidation. I could feel the pressure building, but I refused to back down. One evening, as I returned home from a meeting, I noticed a shadowy figure lingering outside my apartment. My heart raced as I approached, and the figure quickly disappeared into the darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As the weeks turned into months, we faced escalating challenges. Our movement had gained a considerable following, and while that was a victory in itself, it also made us a target. Nexus was relentless in their efforts to stifle our voice, and they were willing to play dirty. One night, I received an urgent call from Mia. "We need you to meet us at the community center. It's important." I rushed over, my heart pounding as I entered the familiar space that had become our hub of activism. The atmosphere was tense, and I immediately sensed that something significant had happened. "What's going on?" I asked, glancing around at the worried faces of my friends. Mia stepped forward, her expression grave. "We've received reports that Nexus has been infiltrating our meetings, gathering information on us, and trying to disrupt our plans. They're actively trying to undermine our credibility." "What do you mean by infiltrating?" I asked, my stomach sinking at the implications. "We believe they've sent people to pose as supporters," she explained, her voice low. "They're trying to sow discord and create divisions within our coalition." I took a deep breath, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "We need to take immediate action. We can't let them weaken us from within." Kara nodded in agreement. "We should hold a meeting to address this and establish guidelines for our group. We need to be transparent and vigilant about who we let into our circle." As we discussed our next steps, I felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on me. This movement meant everything to me and to so many others, and I wouldn't allow Nexus to tear it apart. In the days that followed, we implemented strict protocols to safeguard our meetings and communications. We created a system for vetting new members and established clear channels for reporting any suspicious behavior. Despite our efforts, the atmosphere felt charged with tension. We couldn't shake the feeling that Nexus was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Then, during a particularly heated meeting, an unexpected twist unfolded. A newcomer, a charismatic individual named Alex, presented themselves as a passionate ally. They spoke eloquently about the need for unity and shared goals, and the group quickly rallied around their message. But as I listened to Alex, something felt off. Their ideas seemed too polished, their enthusiasm a bit too rehearsed. I exchanged worried glances with Kara, who mirrored my apprehensions. After the meeting, we decided to dig deeper into Alex's background. We discovered inconsistencies in their story, and it became clear that they were not who they claimed to be. We had successfully exposed another attempt by Nexus to infiltrate our group, but the realization left me feeling uneasy. "We can't keep letting them get this close," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "We need to stay vigilant and protect the integrity of our movement." Kara nodded. "I think we should take this as a wake-up call. We need to tighten our defenses and be even more proactive in our outreach. Let's expand our network of allies and create a coalition that is harder for Nexus to infiltrate." In the weeks that followed, we strengthened our alliances and reached out to other activist groups across the country. We organized joint events and collaborated on campaigns that amplified our collective voices. Together, we created a formidable front against Nexus, and the sense of camaraderie between our groups only deepened. But as our movement grew stronger, so did the tactics employed by Nexus. They began to escalate their harassment, targeting not just our coalition but our families as well. I received ominous messages at home, and I could see the fear in my loved one's eyes. One evening, while I was out for a walk, I noticed a car slowly following me. My heart raced as I picked up my pace, trying to shake the feeling of being hunted. I ducked into a cafe and called Mia. "We need to talk." I said, urgency lacing my voice. I think they're getting more aggressive. Meet us at the community center, she replied, concern evident in her tone. We'll figure this out together. When I arrived at the community center, I found my friends already gathered, their expressions reflecting the seriousness of the situation. We need to consider our safety, Mia began. We've all been targeted, and we can't ignore that. Kara nodded. I've been looking into personal security measures. We need to protect ourselves, but we also have to keep the movement going. Absolutely, I added. We can't let fear dictate our actions. We need to continue advocating for justice and ensure our message remains strong. We spent the evening discussing strategies for our personal safety and the security of our coalition. It was a sobering conversation, but we knew we had to remain resolute in our fight for justice. As weeks turned into months, the tension between our movement and Nexus reached a boiling point. Their attempts to silence us only fueled our determination, and we remained focused on our goal. Then came the day when we received an unexpected opportunity. A major news network reached out to us, offering to feature our movement in an exclusive segment. They wanted to delve into our fight against Nexus and share our stories with a national audience. The news sent shockwaves through our coalition. This was our chance to amplify our message and reach an even broader audience. As we prepared for the interview, I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was an opportunity to expose the truth about Nexus and the damage they had caused, but it also meant stepping into the spotlight where we could become targets once again. In the days leading up to the segment, we worked tirelessly to craft our message. We gathered testimonials, gathered our data, and strategized how to present our narrative compellingly. On the day of the interview, I stood before the camera, flanked by Mia and the anchor. The studio lights blared down on us, and I felt my heart race as we prepared to share our stories with the world. When the camera rolled, I took a deep breath, channeling the energy of our movement. We are here today to shed light on the oppressive tactics of Nexus. I began, my voice steady. For too long, they have operated in the shadows, exploiting individuals and communities without consequence. But today, we stand united in our fight for justice and accountability. As I spoke, I could feel the weight of our collective experiences behind me. The stories of the countless individuals affected by Nexus's greed surged to the forefront of my mind. I was not just representing myself, I was a voice for all of them. Mia stepped in, sharing her own story of how Nexus had impacted her family and community. Her words resonated with emotion, and I could see the vulnerability in her eyes. The anchor prompted us with questions, and we answered with sincerity and passion, determined to make our message clear. The segment aired live, and as we wrapped up, I felt a surge of hope. We had taken a bold step, bringing our fight against Nexus into the public eye. As the cameras faded out, the anchor thanked us for our bravery, but I knew our work was far from over. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from our interview was immediate. Social media exploded with support, and our movement gained traction at an unprecedented pace. People reached out to share their own stories, and the public outcry against Nexus intensified. It felt as though we had ignited a fire that was impossible to extinguish. But with that attention came increased scrutiny from Nexus. They retaliated by launching a campaign to discredit us further, attempting to paint us as radicals with unfounded claims. I received a call from a reporter who had uncovered that Nexus was spreading false information about our coalition. "They're trying to turn public opinion against you," she said. "We need to respond quickly." We gathered at the community center, where the atmosphere was charged with urgency. "We have to counter their narrative," I urged, pacing the room. "We can't let them distort our message. We need to show the truth." Mia spoke up, her voice strong. "Let's create a comprehensive response, facts, testimonials, and evidence of Nexus's misconduct. We can circulate it through our channels and work with sympathetic media outlets to amplify our response." Kara added, "We should also host a press conference. If we present a united front, we can reinforce our credibility and demonstrate that we're not afraid to stand up against their lies." We set to work immediately, poring over our materials and preparing our statements. The press conference was scheduled for a week later, and we wanted to ensure every detail was perfect. On the day of the press conference, I stood backstage, my heart racing. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing as the buzz of anticipation filled the air. I could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on my shoulders, but I also felt the unwavering support of my friends beside me. As we took the stage, I scanned the audience. I saw familiar faces, activists, supporters, and families who had been impacted by Nexus's actions. Their presence gave me strength, and I knew I had to speak not just for myself but for all of them. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice steady despite the nerves. "Today, we stand united to expose the truth about Nexus and the harmful impact they have had on our communities. We will not allow their lies to go unchallenged." Mia and Kara each took turns sharing their experiences, bolstered by the evidence we had compiled. We presented facts, figures, and heartfelt testimonies, creating a powerful narrative that resonated with the audience. The conference concluded with a call to action, encouraging people to stand with us and support our movement. As we stepped down from the stage, I felt a surge of hope. We had faced the storm head-on, and now the tide was turning in our favor. In the weeks that followed, the public's response was overwhelming. The press conference garnered significant media coverage, and support for our movement surged. We began to see tangible results. Local businesses were distancing themselves from Nexus, and community members were rallying together to hold them accountable. But just when it seemed like we were gaining momentum, a storm was brewing. Rumors began to circulate about a potential corporate takeover by Nexus, one that would consolidate their power and undermine our efforts even further. I received an urgent message from one of our allies in the government. "We need to meet," they said. "Nexus is planning something big, and we need to be prepared." We gathered at our community center, the atmosphere heavy with anxiety. "We can't let them slip away," I said, pacing the room. "If they're consolidating their power, it will be even harder to hold them accountable. We need to act now." Kara nodded. "We should leverage our media contacts to expose their plans. If we can get this information out, we might have a chance to rally public support against them. We also need to mobilize our community," Mia added. "Let's organize a march to raise awareness of what's happening. We have to show Nexus that we're not going to back down." With a renewed sense of urgency, we began planning our next steps. The clock was ticking, and we knew we had to act quickly before Nexus solidified their power. As the day of the march approached, the energy in our community was palpable. Flyers were plastered across town, and people were talking about our cause everywhere I went. It felt as if we were standing at the precipice of something monumental. On the day of the march, I stood at the front of the crowd, surrounded by supporters holding signs and chanting for justice. The streets were filled with people, their voices rising in unison, a powerful testament to the strength of our movement. As we marched through the city, I felt a renewed sense of hope. We were not just fighting against Nexus, we were standing up for a brighter future for our community. But as we reached the heart of the city, I noticed a familiar black van parked at the corner. My heart sank as I recognized it. Nexus had sent their people to intimidate us. "Stay together!" I shouted, rallying my friends. "We can't let them break our spirit." As we continued to march, I could see figures emerging from the van, Nexus operatives with stern expressions, ready to confront us. The tension in the air thickened, and I could feel the fear creeping in, but I refused to let it consume us. "Keep marching," I urged, holding my head high. "We are here for justice, and we won't be silenced." The crowd rallied behind me, their voices growing louder, drowning out any attempt to intimidate us. We marched past the van, united and unwavering, our resolve stronger than ever. In the aftermath of the march, the media coverage exploded. Videos of the confrontation spread like wildfire, garnering public sympathy for our movement. People across the country began to share our message, and it felt as if we were on the brink of something revolutionary. But Nexus was not one to back down easily. In the days that followed, they retaliated fiercely, ramping up their attacks on us and our supporters. We received threats, our allies were targeted, and whispers of discontent began to circulate within the coalition. "Stay strong," I told the group during a meeting. "This is their last desperate attempt to silence us. We've come too far to back down now." But despite my words, I felt the pressure mounting. Doubt crept in as I wondered how long we could withstand the onslaught. In a late-night meeting, Mia expressed her concerns. "We need to be careful. They're targeting us personally, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets hurt." Kara chimed in. "We should consider taking a step back for a moment. We've made significant progress, and maybe we can regroup and strategize before moving forward." I understood their fears, but the thought of retreating felt like admitting defeat. We can't let them dictate our actions. We need to stay visible and keep pushing for change. After a long discussion, we agreed to continue our advocacy while also prioritizing our safety. We implemented personal security measures and planned our events carefully, ensuring we always had a support network around us. In the following weeks, we held smaller, localized events that allowed us to connect with community members directly. We shared stories, educated people about the dangers of corporate greed, and emphasized the importance of holding powerful entities accountable. Our grassroots approach was paying off. People were becoming more engaged, and our movement was evolving into a vibrant community of activists dedicated to justice. Then came a breakthrough moment. We received word that a high-ranking official in the government was willing to meet with us to discuss our concerns about Nexus. It was an opportunity to elevate our cause to a national level, and we knew we had to seize it. We prepared tirelessly for the meeting, gathering data, testimonials, and a clear agenda. When the day arrived, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This could be our chance to make a significant impact. As I entered the government building with Mia and Kara, I could feel the weight of our movement on my shoulders. We were representing not just ourselves but countless individuals who had suffered at the hands of Nexus. The meeting was tense but productive. We presented our case with passion and conviction, highlighting the need for accountability and reform. To our surprise, the official listened intently, taking notes and asking insightful questions. "We can't ignore the voices of the people," they said at the end of our presentation. "I will advocate for further investigations into Nexus and their practices." As we left the meeting, a sense of hope washed over me. We had made our voices heard in a way that could lead to real change. The path ahead was still uncertain, but we were one step closer to holding Nexus accountable for their actions. In the days that followed, we received news that the government was launching a formal inquiry into Nexus and their business practices. The media picked up the story, amplifying our movement's message and raising public awareness about the dangers of corporate corruption. It felt like a dream, a testament to the hard work and resilience of our coalition. As the inquiry progressed, we watched with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Would this finally bring justice to those affected by Nexus's greed? Each day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose as we continued to advocate for our community, sharing updates on social media and rallying support. But as we celebrated our successes, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nexus was still lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike back. Their silence was unnerving, and I feared what their next move might be. One evening, while poring over articles about the inquiry, I received an alarming text from Mia. "We need to talk. There's something you need to know." My heart raced as I dialed her number. "Mia, what's going on?" I asked when she answered, anxiety creeping into my voice. "I just got off the phone with a contact in the local government," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "Nexus is planning something big. They're going to attempt to undermine the inquiry and launch a counter-campaign against us." "Do they have specifics?" I pressed, my mind racing. "Not yet, but we need to prepare. They're not going to take this lying down." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as we strategized our response. We gathered at the community center, a hub of energy and determination. "We need to stay ahead of them," I said, pacing the floor. "If they're planning a counter-campaign, we must counter it with our own. Let's rally our supporters and increase our visibility. We need to show the public that we're not backing down." Kara nodded. We should organize a series of town hall meetings to keep our community informed and engaged. If we can keep the conversation going, we can maintain momentum. Absolutely, Mia chimed in. And we can create a social media campaign that highlights the importance of transparency and accountability. We need to remind everyone why we started this fight in the first place. Fueled by a renewed sense of urgency, we set to work planning our events and creating a media strategy. The atmosphere in the room crackled with energy as we laid out our plan. As the days passed, the inquiry into Nexus gained momentum. News reports were filled with accounts of the testimonies of those who had suffered under their practices. Our coalition began to feel the ripple effect of our efforts as more people joined our cause. The momentum peaked when we organized a series of town hall meetings across the city, inviting community members to share their stories and engage with us directly. The turnout was incredible, and each event felt like a celebration of solidarity and resilience. During one of the meetings, I met a woman named Lisa who shared her heartbreaking story of losing her business due to Nexus's unfair practices. Her passion and pain resonated deeply with everyone in the room, and I could see the determination in her eyes. "We won't let them win," Lisa declared, her voice strong. "We have to fight for our rights and for those who can't fight for themselves." Her words ignited a fire within the crowd, and I could feel the energy shift as people rallied together. It was moments like these that reaffirmed my belief in the power of community. But even as we celebrated our victories, Nexus was plotting their next move. I began receiving anonymous threats online, and I could sense the fear creeping back into our coalition. "We have to keep our spirits up," I reminded everyone during our meetings. "Fear is what they want. If we show them we're afraid, we give them power." Mia, always the beacon of positivity, smiled and added, "We've come too far to turn back now. We're stronger than they think." The unity of our coalition shone through, and I felt bolstered by the support of my friends. We spent hours discussing our next moves, focusing on how to counter Nexus's impending attacks. Then came the day we feared. Nexus launched a massive disinformation campaign against us. They flooded social media with false narratives, attempting to undermine our credibility and paint us as extremists. It was disheartening to watch as misinformation spread like wildfire, threatening to erode the trust we had built within our community. "We need to act quickly," I said during an emergency meeting. "If we don't address this head-on, we could lose everything we've worked for." Kara spoke up, her voice steady. "Let's create a comprehensive fact-checking initiative. We can combat their lies with the truth. We should provide our supporters with the facts and encourage them to share them." "Great idea," Mia added. "We need to mobilize our allies and get our message out there. We can't let them dictate the narrative." With our strategy in place, we launched a counter-campaign, highlighting the discrepancies in Nexus's claims and sharing our own evidence. The support from our community was overwhelming, and it felt as if we were fighting back with renewed vigor. As the inquiry continued, we received word that key witnesses were willing to testify against Nexus. Their testimonies were pivotal, shedding light on the inner workings of the corporation and the damage they had inflicted on individuals and families. On the day of the testimonies, I sat in the audience, my heart racing. I felt the collective energy of our coalition around me, each of us hoping for justice. As the witnesses took the stand, their voices resonated with strength and conviction. Their stories were heartbreaking yet powerful, a stark reminder of why we fought. After the testimonies concluded, the atmosphere in the room was electric. I could sense a shift, a growing momentum that signaled hope for our cause. But as the inquiry progressed, Nexus fought back harder than ever. They began to intimidate witnesses, threatening legal action against anyone who dared to speak out against them. The atmosphere grew tense, and I felt the weight of fear creeping in again. We convened at the community center that evening, the air thick with anxiety. "We can't let them intimidate us," I urged, my voice rising. "If we allow them to silence us, we're giving up everything we fought for. We need to rally around our witnesses and show them they're not alone." Mia nodded, determination shining in her eyes. "Let's organize a support network for those who are testifying. They need to know we're standing behind them," Kara added, We should host a rally to show our support for the witnesses. If we can mobilize our community, it will send a strong message to Nexus that we're united. With renewed purpose, we set to work planning our rally. The energy in the room was palpable, and I felt invigorated by the collective determination of our coalition. On the day of the rally, I stood at the forefront of a massive crowd, holding a sign that read, "We stand for justice." The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and solidarity as people gathered to support our witnesses. As the speeches began, I watched as people shared their stories of resilience, and the energy in the crowd surged. "This is our moment!" I shouted into the microphone. "We will not be silenced. We stand together, not just for ourselves but for everyone who has suffered at the hands of Nexus." The crowd erupted in cheers, their voices echoing through the streets. I could feel the power of unity surging around me, and it filled me with hope. This was more than just a rally. It was a declaration of our strength and determination. As the inquiry continued, our coalition became a force to be reckoned with. The testimonies and our public support began to sway public opinion in our favor. But just when it felt like we were on the brink of victory, Nexus struck again, launching a counteroffensive that threatened to undermine our progress. Rumors swirled about a possible settlement agreement between the government and Nexus. If it went through, it could bury our movement and leave the victims without justice. When I received news of the proposed settlement, I felt my heart sink. "We can't let this happen," I told Mia and Kara during an urgent meeting. "We've come too far to let Nexus buy their way out of accountability." Mia's eyes narrowed in determination. "We need to mobilize our supporters. If we can rally enough public outcry, we can pressure the government to reconsider. We'll make it clear that we won't accept anything less than justice," Kara added, her voice unwavering. We launched a campaign to oppose the settlement, gathering signatures, organizing protests, and reaching out to allies in the media. The response was overwhelming. Our supporters flooded social media with messages, and the energy of our movement surged. As the deadline for the settlement approached, I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. Our coalition had grown stronger, but I knew Nexus would not go down without a fight. In the final days leading up to the deadline, we received news that the government was reconsidering the settlement due to the mounting public pressure. I could feel the excitement building within our coalition, but I also felt a wave of apprehension. This was our moment to seize, and we had to give it everything we had. The day before the decision was set to be announced, we held a massive rally, bringing together supporters from all over the city. As I stood on the stage, I looked out at the sea of faces filled with hope and determination. "This is it!" I shouted, the crowd erupting in cheers. "We are here to demand justice for those who have been wronged. We will not back down. We stand united, and together we will make our voices heard." The energy in the crowd was electrifying, and I felt a surge of determination as they chanted our mantra. "Justice for all!" As the rally came to a close, I stepped off the stage, my heart racing. We had given it our all, but now we had to wait for the government's decision. The next day would determine the course of our movement and the future of countless individuals impacted by Nexus's actions. The following morning, I awoke to a flurry of messages on my phone. The news was buzzing with speculation about the government's decision, and I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. At noon, we gathered at the community center, our hearts heavy with anticipation. The news outlets began to report live, and we crowded around the television, watching intently as the anchor spoke. In a surprising turn of events, the government has decided against the settlement with Nexus. They will instead pursue a full investigation into the company's practices and hold them accountable for their actions. A wave of relief washed over the room, followed by cheers and applause. We had done it. Our efforts, our voices, had made a difference. But just as we began to celebrate, I remembered the gravity of the situation. "This is just the beginning," I said, raising my hands to quiet the crowd. "We've won an important battle, but the war isn't over yet. We must remain vigilant and continue our fight for justice." Mia and Kara nodded in agreement, and I could see the determination reflected in their eyes. Over the next few weeks, We worked tirelessly alongside government officials, advocating for thorough investigations and ensuring that the voices of the victims remained at the forefront. Our coalition grew stronger, attracting new allies and supporters who were eager to join the cause. As the investigations unfolded, we received more testimonies from individuals who had suffered under Nexus's oppressive practices. Each story was a powerful reminder of why we fought and fueled our resolve. However, as we dug deeper into Nexus's operations, it became clear that their corruption ran deeper than we had initially thought. New evidence revealed a web of deceit that spanned not only our community but extended to other areas affected by Nexus's influence. "This is bigger than we imagined," I said during a strategy meeting, the weight of our task pressing heavily on my shoulders. "We need to broaden our focus and bring more people into this fight. It's not just about us anymore, it's about everyone who has been harmed," Kara suggested. "Let's reach out to other communities who have been affected by Nexus. If we can unite our voices, we'll have a much stronger impact." With that, we began organizing regional meetings, connecting with other activist groups and communities that had suffered at the hands of Nexus. We shared stories, strategies, and solidarity, building a coalition that spanned far beyond our initial group. The day of the major press conference announcing the findings of the investigation arrived. I stood backstage, surrounded by representatives from various communities who had joined our cause. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and I felt both anxious and hopeful. As we took the stage, I could see reporters, cameras, and supporters filling the room. "Today, we stand together to expose the truth about Nexus," I declared, my voice strong and unwavering. "We have uncovered a pattern of corruption that affects not just our community but countless others across the nation." Each representative shared their story, their voice carrying the weight of their experiences. The solidarity in the room was palpable, and I felt a renewed sense of hope. The press conference concluded with a call to action, urging the public to join our movement and support the push for systemic change. The energy in the room surged as we emphasized that this was not just about holding Nexus accountable but about ensuring that corporate greed would not continue to harm vulnerable communities. In the following weeks, our movement gained unprecedented momentum. The media coverage was relentless, and more communities began to rally around our cause. Protests, marches, and town hall meetings were organized in cities across the nation, amplifying our message. As we stood on the brink of a potential victory, I felt the weight of our collective efforts. We were no longer just a small group fighting against a corporation. We had become a nationwide movement for justice, transparency, and accountability. Yet, the battle was still not over. Nexus continued to push back, leveraging their power and influence to undermine our progress. We faced new challenges as they sought to discredit us and pit communities against one another. One afternoon, I received an anonymous tip about a high-level meeting within Nexus. They were discussing plans to launch a smear campaign against us, aiming to erode the trust we had built with our supporters. "This could be our chance to expose them," I said during a meeting with Mia and Kara. "If we can gather evidence of their tactics, we can turn the narrative back in our favor." With our plan set, we reached out to whistleblowers within Nexus, gathering information on their internal discussions and tactics. We also continued to mobilize our supporters, ensuring they were aware of the potential smear campaign and how to combat misinformation. The days leading up to the next major press conference felt like a whirlwind. We were preparing to unveil the evidence we had gathered about Nexus's deceitful tactics and their attempts to undermine our movement. On the day of the press conference, I stood backstage, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. As I looked out at the crowd, I saw familiar faces, supporters, allies, and individuals who had joined our cause. They were counting on us to hold Nexus accountable, and I couldn't let them down. As we took the stage, I felt the weight of our movement behind me. "Today, we stand united to expose the truth," I began, my voice resonating with conviction. "Nexus has not only harmed our communities but has also attempted to manipulate the narrative to protect their interests. We will not be silenced." We unveiled the evidence of Nexus's tactics, detailing how they had attempted to undermine our movement and silence dissenting voices. The crowd erupted in support, and I could feel the energy shifting in our favor. As the press conference concluded, I felt a surge of hope. We were not just fighting for ourselves. We were standing up for every individual affected by corporate greed and corruption. In the weeks that followed, our coalition continued to grow. We formed alliances with national advocacy groups, expanding our reach and influence. The pressure on Nexus increased, and they began to feel the weight of their actions. Then came the day we had all been waiting for. The government announced they were filing charges against Nexus for their corrupt practices. The news sent shockwaves through the media and our communities. As we gathered to celebrate this victory, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and gratitude. We had fought hard, and the fruits of our labor were finally beginning to pay off. But even as we celebrated, I knew that our work was far from over. The fight for justice was ongoing, and we had to ensure that the changes we sought would be implemented. We organized a series of community meetings to discuss the next steps in our fight for accountability and reform. During these meetings, we emphasized the importance of continuing to advocate for change at every level, local, state, and national. We cannot become complacent, I reminded everyone. This is our chance to create lasting change. We have to push for stronger regulations and protections to ensure that no corporation can harm our communities again. The energy in the room was palpable as people shared their ideas and concerns. Our coalition was evolving into a powerful force, and I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. As the months passed, the investigation into Nexus unfolded, revealing the extent of their corruption. Victims began to receive compensation, and reforms were enacted to protect communities from corporate abuse. It was a long and difficult road, but the momentum was undeniable. On the day the final verdict was announced, I stood in front of a crowd of supporters, my heart pounding with anticipation. The moment felt monumental, and I could see the hope in the eyes of those around me. The announcement was made. Nexus was found guilty of multiple charges, and the court ordered them to pay restitution to the victims and implement substantial changes to their practices. A roar of celebration erupted from the crowd, and I felt tears of joy streaming down my face. We had done it! As I looked around at the faces of my friends and supporters, I realized that this victory was not just ours. It belonged to everyone who had stood up against injustice and fought for what was right. In the aftermath, our coalition continued to grow stronger. We established a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for transparency, corporate accountability, and community empowerment. The experience had changed us all, and as we moved forward, I felt a sense of pride in what we had accomplished together. But I also knew that our work was just beginning. The fight for justice and accountability is an ongoing battle, and we would remain vigilant in our pursuit of a better future for our communities. As I reflected on our journey, I was reminded of the power of unity, resilience, and the strength that comes from standing together in the face of adversity. Together, we could accomplish anything.